Chapter 41, VR Mock War 6. I have a proposition, I said quietly, my voice carrying through the ruined chamber like the whisper of a blade being drawn. Kali's breathing was ragged, her posture defensive despite the exhaustion weighing her down. She still held herself like a fighter, even when her body screamed otherwise. I can help you reclaim what your family lost. That got her attention. Her red eyes flickered, something sharp and weary gleaming behind them. She wanted to ignore me, wanted to believe I was bluffing. But even through the haze of pain, her instincts wouldn't let her dismiss my words outright. You, of all people, know how vital that art is to your legacy, I continued. Without it, the Malekith name remains second tier. With it, you might surpass Lucifer one day. A dangerous statement. A blasphemous one, even, but I saw it land. Her expression twisted, a mix of disbelief and something darker, something dangerously close to hope. You're lying, she hissed, but her voice wavered. I shrugged, keeping my stance casual, loose. I'm not. I've done my research. I know enough to trace it. If you swear a mono-oath to me in the real world that you'll aid me when the time comes, I'll recover it for you, or guide you to it, at least. The color drained from her face. A mono-oath, a contract woven into the very essence of mana, binding its signatories in an unbreakable agreement. To break it was to invite destruction not just physically, but spiritually. You'd control me, she whispered, her voice low, almost fearful. Not control, I corrected softly. Just your word, you'll help me when I call upon you. In exchange, I'll give you the means to restore your family's ultimate martial art, and you'll have your revenge on those who overshadow you. For a long moment, she didn't speak. I let her wrestle with it. Let the idea settle. Let the weight of it sink in. Let her see the future this deal could bring her. A path forward, a path out of the shadows she had been cast in. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her hands curled into shaking fists. I could just kill you, she snarled, her voice laced with venom. It was a fair point, but an empty one. She was injured, exhausted, her mana reserves running on fumes. Even if she had the strength left to kill me here, she'd gain nothing. No art, no power, no way forward. And she knew it. You're insane, she whispered, but the fire in her eyes told me she wasn't walking away. Then, with an almost imperceptible shudder, her shoulders relaxed. Fine, she said at last, I accept, but if you lie to me if your claim turns out to be hollow. She let the threat hang. I smiled. That's fair. She glared at me but didn't protest when I reached into my pouch and pulled out a healing salve, one of the few high-grade ones I had kept in reserve. Carefully, I smeared it over the worst of her wounds, watching as the mana-infused gel sank into her skin and accelerated the healing process. She winced but didn't pull away. That, more than anything, told me the deal was sealed. For now. Let's finish this, I said, unsheathing my sword. Kali gulped, her body tensing despite herself. Even knowing this was a simulation, that her actual body was safe outside the VR pod, she still feared the moment of virtual death, which, to be fair, was entirely reasonable. Pain dampeners or not, the experience of dying in the virtual world was real enough to make people hesitate. I'll make it as painless as I can, I assured her, voice calm. Her expression hardened. She was still Kali Malekith proudful, unyielding. She refused to flinch, refused to let herself look afraid. So when I swung my blade, she met it head-on. There was no cry of pain, no gasp of fear, just acceptance. Then the world shattered. As the last of the virtual realm crumbled, the battlefield faded into the abyss. A bright screen flared in front of me, listing the contribution rankings. Lucifer Windward, Arthur Nightingale, Rachel Creighton, Ren Kagu. Number 2. Ha! Expected. Lucifer had eliminated a quarter of the enemy force alone. Even if I had been the one to orchestrate the war, he had been its unstoppable force. The ranking system calculated not just defeated opponents, but also strategic value. And while I had set the board, Lucifer had burned half of it down. The darkness closed in as the simulation logged us out. My eyes fluttered open. The cool, clinical light of the VR chamber replaced the battlefield's grim destruction. The pod's restraints released, and I pulled myself up with a deep inhale. The world felt strangely slow. No distant roar of beasts, no crackling magic. Just the low hum of the facility's artificial lights and the soft murmurs of waking students. To my right, Lucifer sat up, stretching like he hadn't just waged war against half the academy. His expression was unreadable, though I caught the smallest ghost of a smirk. Rachel, across from me, rubbed her temples, still adjusting to the transition back to reality. Now, I had a mana oath to secure, and the next phase of my plans to put in motion. "You are insane," Jin said, his voice flat as he walked up to me. Coming from him, that was almost a compliment. The Prince of the West was not known for casual conversation, let alone the kind that involved actual emotions. I tilted my head, more out of curiosity than denial. "Insane." "No, I mean," he started, then frowned, as if searching for the right words. "How did you keep track of all of us?" There was something in his tone, genuine confusion, maybe even the smallest edge of admiration, but before I could respond, I noticed we had an audience. Rachel and Cecilia had drawn closer, their eyes sharp with curiosity, and beyond them, a few other students lingered, pretending not to eavesdrop while failing spectacularly. "You were giving pretty exact orders to everyone," Jin continued, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Your tactics weren't anything absurd, but you moved people like they were pieces on a board. You never hesitated. It was like you already knew what was going to happen." "Well, you have to train your mind as well," I said, scratching my head as if it was something obvious, something anyone could do if they just put in the effort. "Train your mind," Rachel echoed, stepping in even closer, her sapphire eyes gleaming with something between fascination and scrutiny. She had a particular way of looking at people when she was interested in them, not just casual interest, but the kind of deep, analytical curiosity that made it feel like she was peeling away layers just by staring too long. It was a little unnerving. "Honestly, I considered myself a good leader," she admitted, "but you're on another level. Your orders weren't just effective, they were precise. It was like you had precognition or something." I blinked. Was it really that impressive? To me, it was just a matter of keeping track of all the available information. The battlefield wasn't chaos. It only looked like that to people who weren't trained to read the patterns. I had the map. I had every unit's position. I had every squad's strength estimated to the decimal point in my head, moving constantly as the battle shifted. All I had to do was visualize it in real time, assign each point a weight according to their strength, speed, and capabilities, then predict the most efficient moves. Simulating it felt natural. For me, this was possible. For them, apparently, it was something bordering on impossible. Cecilia smiled, tilting her head just slightly, like she was watching a particularly amusing trick. Well, she murmured, "looks like our little tactician isn't just book smart after all." Rachel still hadn't stopped staring. Jin, for his part, looked like he was reconsidering my entire existence. I sighed. This was going to be annoying. Chapter 42. Mana Oath. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the lamp hanging overhead, casting soft, flickering light across the polished floor. The Ophelia dorms were known for their luxury high-end living spaces tailored for Class A's elites, but tonight, the room felt smaller. Maybe it was because Kali Malekith was sitting across from me. She looked different outside of the battlefield. No armor, no poised stance, no blood staining her clothes. Just a second year in a dark academy jacket, arms crossed, gaze sharp, still analyzing, still dangerous. But there was something else now, something settling in her, like a cornered beast realizing it was no longer in immediate danger but still unwilling to lower its claws. "So," she said, voice low, almost amused despite herself, "this is the part where I seal a deal with the devil, is it?" "Devil is a strong word," I said, tilting my head. I prefer strategists with long-term vision. Her lips curled slightly. That's what makes it worse. You don't even have the decency to be an obvious villain. Just a guy moving the pieces around while smiling like it's all just a game. I didn't deny it. Relax, I said, leaning back in my chair. I don't plan to abuse the oath. The tasks I'll ask for won't be meaningless. No personal errands. No petty favors. Her red eyes narrowed. Then what? I'll only call on you for things that will help the world. Kali scoffed, shaking her head. And what, exactly, do you think helps the world? A lot of things, I said simply. Stopping wars before they start. Keeping certain people from tipping the balance of power in the wrong direction. Securing lost knowledge before it falls into the wrong hands. Her jaw tightened at the last one. That includes, I continued, watching her carefully, your family's lost grade 6 art. A silence stretched between us, heavy, thick, weighted with meaning. When she asked, her voice quieter now. When I reach Radiant Rank. Her gaze snapped back up to me, searching my expression for deception, arrogance, foolishness, anything. I kept my expression neutral. A long breath escaped her. You really think you'll reach Radiant Rank? I smiled. I don't think I will. I know I will. Kali's fingers drummed against the desk once, twice. Then she exhaled, pushing herself off the chair, standing tall despite her exhaustion. A mono, then she said. A pulse of mono flared around her, crackling like a chain being forged in midair. I stood as well, lifting my hand. Our mono resonated, intertwining as we spoke. Arthur Nightingale, I began, voice steady. Swear to uphold this agreement. I will only request Kali Malekith's aid for matters that contribute to the greater good. In return, I will seek out and ensure the restoration of her family's lost martial art upon reaching Radiant Rank. She inhaled deeply. I, Kali Malekith, swear to fulfill my end of the oath. I will aid you when called, within reason. Our mana swirled together, bright and binding. The oath took hold. The moment it settled, the weight of it pressed into my core, like an invisible chain, unbreakable, irreversible. Kali rolled her shoulders, exhaling sharply. And just like that, I've officially signed my soul away, she muttered. Don't be dramatic, I said, amused. She held my gaze, then sighed. Your mind is dangerous, Arthur. I shrugged. That's what people keep telling me. Kali scoffed, then smirked. A small one, but there. At least you're aware of it. She turned toward the door, stretching out her arms with a satisfied sigh, as if she had just concluded a business deal rather than locked herself into an unbreakable magical contract. Then she paused, one hand on the door handle. So, tell me something, Arthur. HM, you came in first place in Island Survival, then second place in this event. You do realize that means people are starting to notice you, right? I didn't respond immediately, because she wasn't wrong. In 2 consecutive events, I had placed higher than most people expected. Lucifer was expected to be the best, but me, I wasn't supposed to be here. And yet, I was. I tilted my head slightly. Is that a warning? It's an observation, she said smoothly. But if you keep pulling stunts like today, you won't be able to stay in the background much longer. Her smirk widened slightly as she pushed the door open. Good luck with that. And then she was gone. I sat back down, staring at the now silent room. Kali was right. Attention was inevitable now. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Well, I just have to plan accordingly. Underscore, it was the right choice. Kali told herself that over and over as she walked through the quiet corridors of the Ophelia dorms, the weight of the mono oath still pressing against her core like an iron brand. She hadn't hesitated, not really. It had felt instinctual to trust Arthur. And that was the part that unsettled her. Kali Malekith did not trust people. She used them, she broke them, she outplayed them. But trusting someone, especially someone younger, someone technically beneath her in rank and status, that was madness. And yet, Her instincts had screamed at her to take the deal. Maybe it was the Mana Oath itself, the fact that such a contract couldn't be sealed on false terms. Arthur couldn't lie, not about the art, not about reaching radiant rank. The very fabric of Mana itself had acknowledged his claim as possible, as truth. That was enough. And yet, her mind wouldn't stop turning. Had he planned it all? Down to the exact moment Tenebrae Rex was unleashed. Down to the injuries she sustained, just enough to make her vulnerable, just enough to push her into a corner where his offer was the only logical escape? If he had. Kali touched her bottom lip, thoughtful, eyes glinting as a slow shiver ran up her spine. That level of tactical manipulation was not normal. That wasn't just a strategist's mind at work. That was something else, something monstrous. She stretched her arms, shaking off the lingering tension as she stepped into the dorm lounge, only to pause mid-step. Rachel Creighton was standing there, waiting. The future saintess. Brilliant, beautiful, holy in a way that made Kali's very existence itch. The golden girl of the Creighton family, blessed with light magic that could erase darkness itself. Kali, a dark magician, had spent years loathed by people like Rachel. Not because of who she was, but because of what she was. Light and dark, two forces meant to clash. Rachel's sapphire eyes locked onto her immediately. Kali Malekith, Rachel said smoothly, the edge of curiosity in her voice just subtle enough to be polite. What were you doing in the first-year dorms? Kali steadied her. No hostility, not yet, but there was an expectation in that question, a hint of suspicion beneath the surface. She wondered if Rachel even realized how intimidating she could be when she wanted to. Not in a loud, aggressive way. Rachel didn't loom the way warriors like Ren or Orson did. She simply stood and people took notice. But Kali wasn't just anyone. She leaned against the nearest wall, arms crossed, voice casual. I was with Arthur. Rachel didn't react immediately. She didn't widen her eyes or gasp or demand an explanation. She simply tilted her head, watching her with a patience that was far more dangerous than open hostility. With Arthur. Rachel repeated, slow, measured. Why? Kali could already see the thoughts behind her eyes. Rachel was intelligent, and she was suspicious for a reason. Kali never interacted with first years. She should have expected this reaction. Still, she found herself irritated by it. Stop being nosy, Kali said, rolling her shoulders as she pushed past Rachel toward the elevator. She didn't need to look back to know Rachel was still watching her. And the weight of that stare lingered long after the elevator doors shut behind her. Chapter 43. Temporary Rankings. You all did well in both of the examinations we had, Nero announced, standing at the front of the classroom with his usual mildly amused indifference. I wasn't sure if he genuinely cared about our progress or if he just found watching us struggle entertaining. Probably both. Do they even matter? Cecilia sighed dramatically, stretching like a cat in the sun, as if the very thought of exams was draining her will to live. They do, Nero said, completely unbothered, to a certain extent. Your rank will not be determined solely by the midterms, Nero continued. These examinations do play a role, though the midterms will carry the most weight. That being said, rank changes still only occur twice a year. He paused, then added, of course, you also have written rankings. Though, I suppose those matter less. I almost smirked. What's the point of a break if you're just going to give us work? Ian muttered, running a hand through his messy red hair. It is a break, Nero replied smoothly, the kind of smoothness that suggested he had no interest in empathy. Which is why the assignment isn't particularly difficult. It's simply meant to ensure continued growth. Those aren't very simple terms, Cecilia muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear. I bit back a chuckle. Rachel, sitting near the front, raised her hand. Professor, I've been wondering for a while why don't we train with our gifts during lessons? Now that was an interesting question. Even those who had checked out of the conversation perked up a little, waiting for the answer. Nero's expression didn't change, but I noticed the way he tilted his head ever so slightly before speaking, as if he had been expecting this question all along. The purpose of Mythos Academy, he said, is to facilitate your overall growth. Training your gift is important, yes, but it should never become a crutch. If you relied too much on it, you risk stagnating. His gaze flickered toward Cecilia, who had started tapping her nails against her desk in obvious boredom. For example, student Cecilia can achieve spell weaving naturally because of her gift, Nero continued. But if she learns to do it without relying on that ability, she will be able to push even further when she does use her gift. Cecilia huffed. That sounds like a lot of unnecessary effort. Yes, Nero agreed, smiling pleasantly. That's the point. A brief, almost uncomfortable silence. Rachel nodded, thoughtful as ever. Ian leaned back in his chair, looking half convinced, half ready to argue just for fun. Cecilia. She looked about 3 seconds away from arguing on principle. I just watched. Not just Nero, but the entire classroom. Because he was right. Not just about gifts, but about growth. Everyone here had raw talent. Lucifer, Rachel, Ren, Serafina, Cecilia, all of them had overwhelming natural abilities. And yet, even now, they were trapped in the patterns they had always relied on. Their gifts were powerful, but they had limits. And whether they realized it or not, Mythos Academy wasn't just teaching them to use their strengths. It was forcing them to surpass them. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the desk. Growth? How? That was something I could use. And now, the student ranked number 1 is Arthur Nightingale, Nero announced, as if he were merely commenting on the weather. The room stilled. 7 sets of eyes flickered toward me, some in shock, some in calculation, some like Ren's narrowing in immediate, reflexive disbelief. Wait, me? I asked, blinking. You, Nero confirmed, entirely unbothered. You placed first in the island survival and second in the inter-year mock war. However, in terms of sheer calculated points, you surpassed Lucifer, who placed second and first respectively. Your total score exceeds his, placing you ahead of everyone else. I could feel the shift in the room, the faint, almost imperceptible ripple of tension. Lucifer, seated across from me, remained expressionless. His sharp green eyes gave nothing away, though I could tell he was processing. Ren, on the other hand, made an actual noise of protest, something between a scoff and a laugh. Cecilia tilted her head, crimson eyes curious, while Rachel simply watched, her lips parted slightly, as if weighing something in her mind. Jen, as usual, said nothing. Ian sighed, muttering something about how his ranking was a disgrace to dragonkind. Serafina didn't even react. Meanwhile, Nero continued speaking, utterly immune to the weight of the moment. He gestured toward the board, and a holographic display flickered to life. Temporary Class 1A rankings before midterms. Rank 1, Arthur Nightingale. Rank 2, Lucifer Windward. Rank 3, Ren Kagyu. Rank 4, Rachel Creighton. Rank 5, Cecilia Slate Mark. Rank 6, Jen Ashbluff. Rank 7, Ian Vizirian. Rank 8, Serafina Zenith. These are your current rankings, Nero said smoothly, though the final rankings will be determined after the midterms. The number of points isn't displayed, but I assure you, the gap is notable. A pause, then, with his usual detachment, he dropped a bombshell. In the mock war, Arthur was, by far, the most tactically superior student among both years. He was able to read and command the movements of over 200 students in real time while handling logistics on his phone. He identified the location of the 6-star beast, engineered its release at the precise moment that would cripple the second year's strongest player, Kali Melkith, and ensured she was eliminated personally. If the AI could perfectly capture every tactical decision made in real time, he may have even surpassed Lucifer in total contribution. Unfortunately, the technology is not quite advanced enough to track such intricate decision-making. The silence that followed was profound. Ren looked like he wanted to throw his desk through the wall. Rachel exhaled slowly, processing. Cecilia let out a low, delighted laugh, clearly entertained by everyone's reactions. Lucifer just smiled. A small, fleeting thing, gone almost instantly, but I saw it. And I wasn't entirely sure if that was a good thing. After class ended, Rachel drifted over, her expression unreadable for a moment before she settled into something softer, warm, but assessing. "You worked hard, Arthur," she said, offering me a small, genuine smile. I wasn't entirely sure how to respond to that. Compliments weren't something I was particularly used to, nor was the idea of being recognized for anything other than being the extra. "It was because of you and Cecilia," I admitted, scratching the back of my head. "If not for both of you, I wouldn't have defeated that mutating 6-star beast in Island Survival." "Perhaps," she conceded, tilting her head, "but that doesn't change the fact that you are a tactical genius." She said it like it was obvious. Like it wasn't something that needed to be argued, debated, or even acknowledged with any surprise. Simply a fact. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Rachel studied me for a long moment, something flickering behind her sapphire eyes, thoughtful, calculating. Then, almost too casually, she said, "Hey, for the break." I raised an eyebrow. Her lips curled slightly. "How about you come to the Creighton estate?" Chapter 44. Sapphire Plaque. The Creighton family, one of the 7 superpowers of the world. A dynasty that ruled half of the northern continent with the kind of quiet, unshakable authority that came from generations of undeniable dominance. Like the other superpowers, their bloodline had produced radiant trankers every 2 generations, an unbroken legacy of power. But unlike most, they didn't rely on brute strength, monstrous bloodlines, or warrior traditions. No, the Creightons were spellcasters, and they were the best. Better than the Tower of Magic in the Slatemark Empire, better than any academy, sect, or order. The Creighton family had single-handedly crushed the idea that mages were weaker than warriors, and they had done so for centuries. And now Rachel, the second princess of that family, had just invited me into their estate. I stared at her, not entirely sure if I had heard correctly. "Why do you?" I began, feeling, for once, genuinely blindsided. Rachel scratched her cheek, looking vaguely embarrassed, as if she had just suggested something completely normal and not wildly out of place. "I know you probably want to meet your family over the break," she said, a little too casually, "but honestly, if you have time, come to the Creighton estate." She turned and started heading for the exit, only to pause mid-step, pivot, and walk straight back to me. I blinked. Rachel tilted her head, sapphire eyes narrowing just slightly. "By the way," she asked, "what kind of relationship do you have with Colleen Malekith?" I blinked again. "Relationship," I repeated, brain stalling. "Yeah," Rachel said, her voice light but her curiosity anything but subtle. "She came out of your room in Ophelia." Instantly, I felt every single gaze in the room sharpen. Some with intrigue, some with amusement, some like Ian's gleaming with outright entertainment. Cecilia, still lounging at her desk, let out a slow, delighted chuckle. I raised my hands, suddenly feeling like I had stepped onto a very dangerous battlefield with no weapon in hand. "Nothing like that," I said quickly. She was just asking me about my tactics. It was, objectively speaking, the worst possible excuse. Rachel didn't buy it. I could see it in the way she raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching slightly. "Oh, right," Lucifer suddenly chimed in from behind me, his voice perfectly smooth. "You were the one who eliminated her, weren't you?" The way he said it made it sound far more suspicious than it actually was. Rachel considered that for a moment, then smiled. "All right," she said, as if deciding to drop the matter entirely, which somehow made me even more uneasy. "Come to the Creighton estate, okay?" Before I could respond, she reached into her pocket and handed me a small sapphire plaque. The moment it touched my palm, I felt a flicker of golden mana seep into my skin. Rachel's mana. Her gift. I clenched my fingers around it, the faint pulse of energy still lingering. Then, before I could react, Rachel turned on her heel and scurried off, her golden hair catching the light as she disappeared through the door. I exhaled. Cecilia laughed softly. Ian looked entirely too entertained. Lucifer just smiled knowingly, which was somehow more unsettling than if he had outright laughed at me. I sighed, finally looking down at the plaque in my hand only to find Serafina staring at it, too. She wasn't saying anything, just watching. I stared back at her. Serafina didn't tilt her head in amusement like Cecilia, or grin like Ian. She just stared, her expression as blank as ever, doll-like in its complete lack of emotion. I had no idea what she was thinking, and somehow that made me even more concerned. Then, without a word, she simply stood up, turned around, and left the classroom. I watched her go, then looked back at the plaque in my hand. I had a very bad feeling about all of this. Underscore? Wow, you got a fancy plaque from a princess, Rose said, completely deadpan, ignoring the sheer existential crisis I was currently experiencing. How cool, Arthur, moving up in the world. She clapped, monotonically. I don't want to move up like this, you know? I muttered, scratching the back of my head like a man who had just realized he had stepped onto a very slippery slope and was already halfway down. Rose chuckled, finally breaking character. Okay, jokes aside, she said, why do you hate it? It's an expectation, I said, turning the small sapphire plaque over in my fingers, feeling the weight of it. Rachel basically handed me a free pass to the Creighton estate. That's not just a casual invitation. She expects me to visit. Well, are you going to? Rose asked, her gaze curious. I considered it. Honestly, I just might. Because if I wanted my Beastwell, I needed to get to Olive Asher Breeze, a remote island off the northern continent's coast. And getting there would be infinitely easier if I had Rachel's help, not just because she was strong, but because she was a Creighton princess, an influential Creighton princess, which made dealing with her both an asset and a liability. Rose narrowed her eyes, then grinned. Oh, I see. Don't forget this lowly being when you start dating a mighty princess. Sir Arthur Nightingale. She pressed her hands together in mock reverence and bowed her head like she was sending me off on some epic royal courtship. Stop, Rose, I groaned, palming my face. I'm serious, you know? You're rank 1 now, Rose said, counting off her fingers as if listing my crimes. A princess gave you a plaque to her palace. Kali Malekith, daughter of a major Western family, came to your room in the dead of night. And yet... Wait. I raised my hands, alarm bells blaring. Where did you hear about Kali? Oh, that, Rose said, innocence personified. Everyone knows Arthur. I felt my soul leave my body. How? Rose shrugged. People talk. I narrowed my eyes. Who talks? She tapped her chin, mock thoughtful. Ian's friend probably saw her coming down from your floor. I sighed deeply. Nothing in this world spread faster than a misunderstood situation. Look, I said, exhausted beyond belief. Nothing happened between me and her. Just tactics talk. Rose looked at me, expression unreadable. Then she rolled her eyes. All right. I'm serious. She sighed, tilting her head, giving me one last, knowing look. Okay, she said at last, if you say so. I had a sinking feeling she didn't believe me. And worse, I had an even stronger feeling that absolutely no one else would either. Chapter 45, Princess's Toy. Cecilia woke up with a quiet hum, stretching like a cat before slipping out of bed with practiced ease. Her morning routine was flawless, efficient, automatic. She brushed her teeth methodically, the same way she did everything without hesitation, without waste. Into the shower, washed, dried, and moving on in minutes. Her way of getting ready was simple in execution, but perfected by habit. A slight braid at the crown of her golden hair, uniform smoothed out without a single crease, ribbon adjusted just right. People who only knew the chaotic, teasing princess of the Slatemark Empire wouldn't believe how precise her mornings were. But then, they didn't know Cecilia Slatemark. Not really. In the palace, she had maids to attend to every detail, but she had long learned to do these things herself. Independence wasn't optional. If she wanted to thrive at Mythos Academy, she couldn't rely on a servant to fix her buttons or brush her hair every morning. Done, she exhaled, standing, ready to leave. Then she paused. She turned toward the mirror, leaning in, studying her reflection with a critical eye. Her braid was off, too tight on one side. She sighed, undoing the right braid and redoing it, then frowned. Now the left side felt wrong. Her narrowed crimson eyes flicked to her reflection like a predator spotting an irritating flaw in its domain. She ended the other braid, rebraided it. Still off. Undo, redo. This time, she didn't stop until it was perfect. Satisfied, she finally left the room. At the Hyperloop station, students were gathered, talking, glancing at her with awe, curiosity, hesitation. Some greeted her, waving politely. Cecilia greeted who she wanted to, ignored who she didn't. She sat down, crossing one leg over the other, her fingers absently twirling a lock of golden hair. A sigh left her lips. She stared at her reflection in the window, the world outside rushing by. As I thought, she murmured, voice quiet enough that no one would hear. She didn't like it. Not the uniform, not the braid. Something else. Something vaguely irritating, sitting at the edge of her thoughts, just out of reach. She really didn't like this. Cecilia finally reached Class 1A, stepping into the room with the easy confidence of someone who owned the space by default. Her eyes flickered across the classroom, landing unexpectedly on Arthur. He had arrived before her. That was new. She tilted her head, studying him with mild amusement. Arthur Nightingale was a surprise. A toy, yes, something she could wind up and watch with delight, something that brought her amusement. But more than that, he had surprised her more times than she cared to admit. Her gaze drifted. Ian was standing at Arthur's desk, talking in his usual loud, brash manner. Rachel, meanwhile, was sitting nearby, reading something on her phone, or at least pretending to. Cecilia recognized the act immediately. Rachel's fingers were poised too carefully, her shoulders too stiff. She wasn't just reading, she was listening, eavesdropping. Cecilia, of course, ignored all of them and went to her seat, rubbing her spatial ring absently, fingers tracing its cool, familiar surface. Then she caught a particular sentence. "So hi, Arthur," Ian prodded, voice brimming with barely contained mischief. "Did you really get together with Collie?" In an instant, something flared. A pulse of golden mana, a streak of crimson energy brief, clashing, unintentional. Cecilia's fingers froze against her ring. What? She glanced across the room. Rachel had stiffened, her expression carefully neutral, but Cecilia could see it. The slight tension in her jaw, the way her fingers hovered over her screen. Rachel had reacted to. Their eyes met. They both came to the same conclusion at the same time. "Stop being annoying," they snapped in unison. Ian, entirely unfazed, simply chuckled. "Weirdos," he waved them off before turning his attention back to Arthur, utterly undeterred. "Anyway, answer me." Cecilia exhaled slowly. Why would she care? Why had she even reacted? And yet her senses sharpened, her focus tuning in on Arthur's next words before he even spoke. "I swore nothing of that sort happened with Collie," Arthur said, his voice firm, irritated. "I'd appreciate it if your friend didn't lie to the whole academy about it." Ian grinned, unbothered. "She came from your room. At night." At night? Cecilia's fingers twitched against her ring, scratching faster. "It was just a convenient time," Arthur replied, exhaling sharply. Yeah, convenient time for all that," Ian said, grinning wider as he clapped a hand on Arthur's shoulder. Enemies to lovers type stuff. Arthur's glare could have burned holes through Ian's skull. Cecilia barely noticed. She was too aware of how fast her fingers were moving against her ring. Too aware of Rachel, who was trying and failing to look more focused on her phone than necessary. Too aware of the fact that, for some reason, she was still paying attention. He's just an interesting toy, Cecilia reminded herself. a toy. That was all. And yet, she had helped him. When Nero asked how the points for hunting the 6-star beast should be distributed, suggesting an even split between both princesses and Arthur, she had spoken up. Why? Because it would be amusing if Arthur came first. Because it would make things more entertaining. Because she liked watching him defy expectations just to see how far he'd go before breaking. Cecilia tapped her fingers against her desk, her nails clicking rhythmically. And then the question crept in. Who was Arthur Nightingale? A commoner. A nobody. A pawn who refused to move as expected. She wanted to know. No, she had to know. Cecilia rose from her seat. Ignoring Rachel's gaze, she walked toward Arthur. He glanced up just as she leaned down, placing her golden plaque on his desk with deliberate ease. "Come visit the Imperial Palace when you have time," she purred, her voice smooth, teasing, dripping with amusement. She winked, her crimson eyes gleaming, then turned on her heel and sauntered back to her desk. This was all for fun, wasn't it? Cecilia twirled a lock of golden hair between her fingers, her gaze drifting back to Arthur. At the same time, she remembered his words, his desire to grow stronger. Was this really just for fun? Chapter 46, Fall Break. A plaque from Cecilia, too. I sighed, turning the golden insignia over in my palm, feeling the smooth, polished surface beneath my fingers. Like Rachel, she had given me an open invitation. Unlike Rachel, her invitation led to the Imperial Palace of the Slatemark Empire. I stared at it for a long moment before slipping it into my pocket. Why was she doing this? Was this just another game to her? A fleeting whim, like a cat toying with a mouse not out of hunger, but boredom. It wasn't as if I had any plans to visit the Empire during the fall break anyway. Arthur's parents had already left on vacation with my sister, though calling it a vacation was generous. They were touring academies, trying to figure out which one she should apply to since she wasn't talented enough to get into Mythos Academy or Slatemark Academy. So my plans were already set. I was going to the Crichton estate. Rachel had given me her sapphire plaque with pure intent, nothing hidden beneath the surface. Cecilia was different. I exhaled slowly. Maybe ignoring her would be the smarter choice. But that wasn't a decision I needed to make right now. Fall break was approaching fast, but before that, I had a one-on-one meeting with Professor Nero regarding my progress so far and, more importantly, my assignment for the break. His office was exactly what I expected: neat, sleek, modern in the way only this world could achieve. Holographic displays hovered above the polished desk, a stark contrast to the archaic wooden bookshelves lining the walls. Nero barely looked up as I stepped inside. "Welcome, Arthur," he said smoothly, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sit." I complied. "Let's see," Nero murmured, tapping at a glowing interface. Numbers, data, and my entire academic record flickered into view. When you joined Mythos Academy, you were rank 8. No recorded art or gift. Low silver rank. Now, he scrolled through the data, pausing. You have improved significantly in a short period of time. Mid-silver rank. First overall in both the island survival and interior mock war. Which means, at least temporarily, you hold rank 1. He tapped his fingers on the desk, deep in thought, before finally looking at me. "I trust your grade 5 art is progressing well." "It is, Professor." I nodded. "Good." His sharp, analytical eyes studied me. "It's a grade 5 art mastery won't come quickly. You've advanced well, but don't expect shortcuts." He flicked his wrist, and a scroll materialized on his desk, hovering slightly above the surface before settling. "This is your assignment for the fall break," he said. A more advanced multi-elemental 4-circle spell utilizing mana weaving. "Given your progress in class, I believe you are ready for it." He slid it across the desk. I picked it up, feeling the weight of expectation settle alongside it. Fall break wasn't going to be a break at all. But I already knew that. And I had far bigger plans. Plans that had nothing to do with assignments or academics. Plans to survive. Thank you, Professor, I said, bowing slightly as I took the scroll and stepped out of the office. The door slid shut behind me with a soft hiss, sealing Nero back in his world of calculations and unspoken expectations. I glanced at the scroll in my hand, feeling its weight more than its actual mass. Mind aspect, a task designed to refine mana weaving, multi-elemental casting, mental finesse. All well and good, but my priorities lay elsewhere. The beast will. Without it, catching up to those monsters was nothing more than a pipe dream. I turned down the corridor, mind already running through logistics, routes, preparations only to halt as I noticed someone standing just a few paces away, leaning against the wall like she had all the time in the world. Seraphita Zenith. Even in her usual dazed state, she looked otherworldly. Flowing silver hair, ice blue eyes, features sculpted with that elven softness that made her seem just slightly untouchable. She didn't speak, just stared at me, silent and unreadable, before pushing herself off the wall and walking past me toward the office. I wasn't surprised. Of course, she'd be next. She was officially rank 7, and I was rank 8 before all of this. She passed by with a quiet grace, and as she did, a scent followed soft, warm, distinctly honeyed. Without meaning to, I turned my head and found her doing the same. For a moment, our gazes met, hers cool, indifferent, with the barest tilt of curiosity. Then she turned away and stepped into the office, vanishing behind the closing door. I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck as I continued walking. God, I muttered under my breath. She's unnervingly beautiful. And just like that, fall break arrived. The last day before departure was filled with an odd mix of relief and lingering tension, students excited to leave, some already talking about their plans, while others were too focused on training to care. For me, it was just another step forward. One more move in a game where standing still meant falling behind. I packed light, just the essentials. The scroll Nero gave me, my sword, my spatial ring holding everything else I might need, and, of course, the sapphire plaque Rachel had handed me. At the Hyperloop station, I found Rose leaning against a pillar, arms crossed, watching me with her usual mix of amusement and mild exasperation. So, she said, tilting her head, off to a grand estate, ha! Meeting the royal family, attending lavish banquets, maybe even learning some forbidden magic secrets in a hidden library. I sighed. I'm literally just visiting Rachel's house. Rose grinned. Yeah, Rachel's house, which happens to be the Creighton estate. Which happens to be one of the most powerful places in the world. No big deal. I rolled my eyes. I'll bring you back a souvenir if it helps. She perked up. I'll hold you to that, preferably something expensive. I chuckled, shaking my head. Sure, I'll grab you a golden goblet or something. Good, she said, before her tone softened just slightly. Take care of yourself, okay? You're not exactly great at avoiding trouble. I nodded. I will, you too. With that, she gave me a mock salute and turned away, vanishing into the crowd of departing students. The station was busy, students warping off to various corners of the world. Some were going home, some were heading to private training grounds, and some, like me, were traveling with friends who happened to be from absurdly powerful families. Rachel was waiting at the warp gate, dressed in casual yet refined attire, her usual noble grace making her stick out effortlessly even among Mythos students. You're late, she said, tapping the plaque on her wrist. I raised an eyebrow. I'm on time. You're just early. She huffed. Being early is being on time. I decided not to argue with that particular brand of noble logic. Instead, I glanced at the warp gate ahead of us, a large, circular structure pulsing faintly with soft blue light, crackling at the edges with controlled mana surges. Beyond it, waiting on the other side, was Luminark, the capital city of the Creighton family. A place of legendary spellcasters, ancient libraries, and a world of power that I had barely scratched the surface of. Rachel glanced at me, ready. I exhaled. Always. And with that, I stepped through the gate. Chapter 47, Luminarch City. Fall break arrived like an inevitability. No grand send-off, no emotional farewells, just the slow trickle of students filtering out of Mythos Academy, each heading to their own destinations. Some were going home, some were off to private training grounds, and some, like me, were about to step into a whole different world. Rachel had insisted in that effortless, noble way of hers that she would handle all travel arrangements. I hadn't even seen the bill, probably for the best. The cost of teleporting off Mythos Academy's private island wasn't for those who checked their bank statements. And just like that, in less than a minute, I found myself stepping out of a warp hub in the northern continent, an ultra-modern facility with sleek walls, automated transport routes, and travelers moving with well-practiced efficiency. Rachel, completely unfazed by any of it, glanced at her phone and gestured for me to follow. "Come on," she said. "We have another transfer." I followed, wondering not for the first time what exactly I'd gotten myself into. The flight to Luminarch was smooth, expensive, and fast. At least, I assumed it was expensive. When the seats reclined into full beds, when the attendants greeted Rachel by name, and when the in-flight system asked if I wanted my personal climate adjusted, I knew better than to ask. Rachel, for her part, was perfectly at ease. She sipped her coffee, looking out the window, as if the bustling world below was just another passing detail. "Do you travel like this often?" I asked, trying not to sound too much like a commoner staring at a palace. She blinked, then smiled. "Only when it's necessary." Right, necessary. I let it slide. It wasn't long before Luminarch came into view, the capital of the Creighton family. A city of progress and power, built not just for spellcasters but by spellcasters, with tech seamlessly fused with mana, creating an environment that thrived on both science and magic. Towering structures of reinforced steel and crystal stretched toward the sky, air transit routes weaving effortlessly between skyscrapers. The entire city buzzed with movement, from automated transports on the streets below to drones zipping through the air, delivering packages, managing traffic, or scanning the city for security. Unlike Mythos Academy's controlled environment, Luminarch was alive. And at the heart of it all stood the Creighton estate. The moment we stepped off the private airship, a sleek vehicle was already waiting. Rachel barely acknowledged the driver as we were ushered inside. The car took off smoothly, navigating the immaculate streets, past corporate towers with Creighton insignias, digital holograms advertising the latest monotech advancements, and elite spellcaster academies that fed directly into the Creighton ranks. "Welcome to my home," Rachel said, a small smirk playing on her lips. The Creighton estate was not a house. It was a city within a city. High-tech security drones patrolled the perimeter, scanning everything that entered. The estate itself was massive, designed with both functionality and elegance in mind. Unlike the Slatemark Empire's opulent, almost theatrical grandeur, the Creighton estate radiated efficiency. A fortress of steel, glass, and reinforced alloys built for research, development, and power. Rachel's presence meant zero delays. As we approached the colossal gates, I retrieved the Creighton insignia she had handed me back at Mythos. The guards barely needed to see it before bowing their heads in acknowledgement. "We welcome you, esteemed guest of the Creighton family," one of them intoned. "Please, enter." The door slid open with mechanical precision, revealing a world beyond the walls. Not just a mansion, not just a compound, an entire ecosystem. The research district sprawled ahead, massive laboratories running experimental magic tech research, training arenas, development centers, all within the estate. Automated vehicles moved along designated pathways, transporting goods, while mechanized constructs patrolled the roads, ensuring smooth operations. I was taken to a waiting lounge, a sleek, minimalist room with soft lighting, an interactive display, and a seating area that felt suspiciously like a luxury meeting room. Rachel, after ensuring I had everything I needed, excused herself, mentioning something about checking in with her father before we met him. And then, for the first time since I stepped off the airship, I was left alone. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. This place was different from Mythos Academy. It wasn't just a school for elites, it was a command center for one of the world's ruling families. A few minutes passed before the door slid open again, and a staff member entered. "You may proceed to the garden pavilion," they informed me. "Miss Rachel is waiting for you there." I nodded, standing up and following them through a series of wide, polished hallways, the smooth flooring subtly reinforced with mono-threaded materials that absorbed sound. Finally, I stepped out of the estate's inner buildings and into something completely different. A garden. Not just any garden, a massive, cultivated sanctuary in the middle of the estate. Tall trees lined the perimeter, their leaves glowing faintly with stored mana. Exotic flowers bloomed in carefully arranged biomes, some floating just above the ground, held aloft by magical currents. At the center of it all was a crystal-clear stream, winding through the area, feeding into a cascading waterfall that shimmered under the afternoon sun. And there, standing by the edge of the water, was Rachel. She had changed at some point, now wearing simple white robes, the kind meant for comfort rather than ceremony. The way the sunlight caught her golden hair, the way her sapphire eyes reflected the water, it was almost surreal. "You finally made it," she said, turning with a bright, effortless smile. The way she tilted her head slightly, the way her expression carried a warmth that was completely genuine. For a brief moment, I nearly forgot how to respond. "Yarach," I managed, keeping my voice level as I stepped closer. She stretched her arms slightly, then, without hesitation, opened them wide in an invitation. A hug. I hesitated for half a second. Rachel Creighton, second princess of one of the world's most powerful families, was openly, unreservedly offering a hug. Likely because we were finally inside her estate, far from prying eyes. I accepted. She felt warm, steady, comforting. She smelled like clean linen and something faintly floral, not the overwhelming perfume Cecilia favored, but something simpler, natural, familiar. She pulled away first, smiling. "Father's eager to meet you." "Your father," I repeated, blinking. "Of course," she said, as if it was obvious. "He was curious about the guy the first gave the Creighton insignia to." That did nothing to settle my nerves. She started leading the way again, but now I was very aware of where we were headed. Alasta Creighton, Archmage, master of circle magic, one of the strongest individuals on the continent. I swallowed. "Where exactly are we meeting him?" Rachel gestured upward. I followed her gaze and saw, just barely visible above the trees, a spire. Not just a building, a monument, a tower that scraped the sky, its structure reinforced with cutting-edge magic tech. His observatory, Rachel said simply, "Come on, I'll take you." As we approached, the sheer scale of the tower became clear. It wasn't just tall, it was a research hub, a place where theories were tested, magic tech was developed, and the future of spellcasting was written. Rachel took the lead, guiding me up a high-speed elevator that shot toward the top. At last, we reached the final platform, stepping onto a wide balcony that overlooked the entire estate. And waiting for us, standing with an air of absolute control, was Alasta Creighton. Tall, silver-haired, eyes that burned with restrained power, as if he could see through everything with a single glance. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of experience, authority, and something deeper, raw intellect. "Rachel," he said, his gaze settling on me, "it seems you brought me someone very interesting." Chapter 48, King Alasta Creighton. Alasta Creighton, a name that carried the weight of legends, stood before me, exuding an air of casual authority that only came from absolute power. This was a man who wielded nine-circle magic as effortlessly as one might flick a wrist. A man whose very presence was a reminder that the Creighton family wasn't merely a lineage of powerful mages, it was a dynasty that had shaped the course of magical history. To the world, he was one of 3 living nine-circle archmages. To the Creighton family, he was its cornerstone, its shield against external threats. To humanity, he was one of its greatest defenders against the ever-looming menace of the Shadow Seekers. And to Rachel, he was simply father. There was no point in hiding my abilities. It's an honor to meet you, Archmage Creighton, I said, bowing respectfully. A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. At ease, young Arthur. Call me Alasta, if you prefer. Thank you for your generosity, I replied, a touch of relief washing over me. So Alasta continued, a hint of intrigue in his voice. You seek to hone your magical skills here at the estate? I met his gaze, my resolve firm. Yes, I confirmed with a nod. Alasta's smile widened. Then he declared, his voice brimming with a hint of challenge, allow me to introduce you to the realm of beyond. Aren't you a bit busy for this, Father? Rachel asked, mirroring my astonishment. Alasta chuckled, a deep, rich sound that carried no small amount of amusement. Consider it a lesson for both of you. After all, reaching white rank is only a matter of time. He wasn't wrong. Both Rachel and I were nearing white rank, although I was going to reach it before her despite being behind her right now. The point where magic began to shift from mere structured spellcasting into something closer to true artistry. Reaching that rank meant unlocking 5-circle magic, spells so potent they could reshape battlefields. And here was a man who could teach me how to wield them properly. Please, I said, bowing slightly. An Archmage's lesson wasn't something you turned down. Alasta wasted no time. With a flick of his wrist, a vibrant blue flame appeared in his palm. It didn't flicker like a normal flame, it burned with a dense, concentrated heat that made the air around it shimmer. A basic 5-circle fire spell, he said, as if he were demonstrating a minor parlor trick. At this level, mana is compressed to such an extent that the flame's temperature rises dramatically, changing its color. You'll notice the lack of waste, no stray embers, no excess energy bleeding out. His gaze flickered between me and Rachel, a hint of challenge in his eyes. Let's delve into the mechanics. And then he did exactly that. He broke the spell apart, piece by piece, deconstructing the layers of mana manipulation that went into shaping it. He explained the principles of spell compression, the way circles interlocked, how mana flowed through invisible conduits to create stability. It was meticulous, precise, and frankly overwhelming, like watching a grandmother dissect a technique that lesser mages spent lifetimes failing to understand. Of course, Alasta mused, the standard approach requires precise calculations, spatial coordinates, velocity estimations, elemental ratios. He paused, watching as I absorbed the information, then smiled slightly. But there's a more elegant way to bypass all of that, a technique we call Laplace. Rachel's head tilted. Laplace. Alasta nodded, a refined method of spellcasting that eliminates the need for manual calculations by reading ambient mana flow in real time and allowing the spell to shape itself accordingly. His expression turned mildly conspiratorial. Theoretically, it allows for instantaneous spell adaptation and reaction speed beyond conventional limits. It's not something just anyone can learn, only those with high mana sensitivity. His gaze lingered on me for a moment longer than I liked. It's possible for you, Arthur, though it's not exactly aligned with your focus, is it? Rachel gave me an inquisitive look. I answered truthfully. I'm more interested in magic that complements my swordsmanship, rather than becoming my main focus. Alasta chuckled. Ah, a swordsman who wants magic as a tool rather than a foundation. A rare breed these days. His eyes twinkled with interest. I can't exactly give you a crash course in magic for swordsmen, but I can refine what you already know. Hearing that from him, it was like having an astrophysicist tell you they had time to tutor you in basic equations. Rachel, however, looked like someone had just told her to sit out of a competition. Wait, what about me? She demanded. You're already following the proper path, Alasta said smoothly. Mastering Laplace and these 5-circle spells is your priority. You're at a plateau, but this will push you past it. Rachel crossed her arms, looking mildly betrayed, but not entirely unwilling. Alasta turned back to me. Now, Arthur, he said, his gaze sharp. Show me your strongest spell. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, taking a breath, I summoned fire. It wasn't elegant, wasn't refined, it was just the 4-circle spell I was most familiar with, Flame Lance. A concentrated spear of fire crackled to life in my palm, its heat distorting the air slightly. I could feel Alasta assessing it, breaking it down in real time, analyzing every flaw before I even cast it. "Launch it," he said. I obeyed. The lance streaked forward, a burning projectile slicing through the air, and disintegrated before it ever reached him. Alasta hadn't even moved. There had been no counterspell, no visible defense, just an application of ambient mana that unraveled my attack before it could complete. A flick of his wrist, and my best spell had been rendered utterly useless. Not going to lie, that stung a little. "Not bad," he said, which somehow made it worse. "Your mana is pure and your technique isn't sloppy. But there's inefficiency, gaps in the way your spell is constructed." He stepped forward, raising his hand. Then, with the exact same mana output, he cast the same spell I had. Except his flame lance was clean, precise, lethal. And when he fired it, the sheer force of the impact obliterated a boulder into nothing but glowing embers. I stared, not because of the raw power he had used the same amount of mana as I had, but his control, his spell construction, his efficiency had turned that same energy into something infinitely more refined. "This," Alasta said, turning back to me, "is what separates mages. Power means nothing if you can't wield it properly." I swallowed, forcing my thoughts back into focus. "So what am I doing wrong?" Alasta smiled. "Let's find out." What followed was an hour of relentless, brutal refinement. He dissected my form, forced me to recast Flame Lance over and over, correcting every mistake with ruthless precision. He adjusted my stance, my incantations, my mana control. Every repetition trimmed inefficiencies, shaved away wasted energy, and tightened my control. And slowly, painfully, it started to click. By the end, my Flame Lance wasn't just a spell. It was sharper, faster, stronger. It wasn't perfect, but it was the first step toward mastery. Alasta clapped his hands together, breaking the silence. "Enough for today." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You've absorbed enough for now," he said. "Get some rest. We'll continue tomorrow." Rachel and I turned to leave, but just before I stepped through the doorway, Alasta's voice stopped me. "Arthur." I turned. He met my gaze, his eyes unreadable. "Don't underestimate the power of a well-placed spell in battle. A swordsman who commands magic is a force to be reckoned with." I nodded. "I'll remember that." As Rachel and I walked back toward the estate, I could feel it a shift. A realization. Magic wasn't just a tool. It was a weapon. And I had every intention of mastering it. Chapter 49. Mythical Creatures. Alasta Creighton's tutelage was everything I'd hoped for and more. His magical prowess was legendary, and I felt incredibly fortunate to be learning under his watchful eye. A sudden splash jolted me from my introspection. Water dripped down my face as I whipped my head around to glare at the culprit, Rachel, a mischievous glint dancing in her eyes. She tried to stifle a laugh, her cheeks puffing out momentarily before collapsing into a fit of giggles. "What's so funny?" I grumbled, wiping away the water. "The look on your face," she exclaimed, wiping a tear from her eye. "You always get so grumpy when I do that." I sighed, forcing a smile. "Maybe a little," I admitted. My gaze, however, involuntarily drifted down, catching a glimpse of what her white robes dared to reveal. Seriously, I thought with a groan, did she have to look like a walking Greek goddess? Didn't she realize how difficult it was to keep my eyes from wandering where they shouldn't? Unlike Cecilia, Rachel wasn't one for playful teasing, at least not that I'd noticed. Maybe her serious nature masked it. "Are you heading out to the Cobalt Sea tomorrow?" she asked, stretching languidly. "It's definitely time," I replied. I needed to find a way to awaken my beast will. But wouldn't it be more productive to train here? You're learning from Alasta himself, one of the most powerful mages in the world. She raised an eyebrow, a hint of protest in her voice. "I crave a more volatile environment," I offered, masking my true purpose. While Alastair's guidance has been invaluable, training in the wild will sharpen my senses in a different way. Rachel pouted, her disappointment evident. Just then, Alastair's voice cut through the tension. "Arthur's right, Rachel," he said. "While I've offered what I can, facing the unknown will undoubtedly hone his instincts. But father, can't you take my side for once?" she pleaded with a playful frown. Alastair chuckled. "There's always next time, my dear." Speaking of which, the three of us will be having dinner together tonight. I would have loved to introduce you to Cathvilne, but she's currently stationed at the Slatemark Empire's Magic Tower. Cathvilne Creighton, Rachel's older sister by 7 years. A prodigy in her own right, a 7-circle mage, but overshadowed by Rachel's immense potential. With her Saintess gift, Rachel possessed the potential to become a 9-circle mage, surpassing even her own father in the future. Dinner at the Creighton Manor called for a change of clothes. Although it was a small gathering, I wasn't about to show up looking like I just rolled out of bed. I activated the AR mirror in my room, its virtual projection allowing me to experiment with different outfits. Sleek black, that was the answer, a crisp black shirt paired with a dark gray, spotted blazer, both tailored to perfection. Custom cufflinks added a touch of personal flair, glinting in the virtual light. To finish things off, a solid tie bar adorned with an obsidian die, a subtle statement piece. Satisfied, I stepped out of my room, ready to face the evening. The Creighton Manor was an imposing sight. Massive spires scraped the sky, a testament to the family's wealth and power. The guards, already alerted to my arrival, nodded respectfully as I approached. The automatic doors whooshed open, granting me entry. Following the familiar path, I made my way to the dining room, designed for intimate gatherings rather than grand banquets. A long mahogany table stretched before me, adorned with a dazzling array of dishes that could feed a small army. At the head of the table sat Alastair Creighton, his regal bearing softened by a warm smile. Rachel, resplendent in a flowing sapphire dress, sat next to him, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Ah, Arthur, there you are," boomed Alastair, his voice rich and welcoming. Come, take a seat." He gestured towards the empty chair beside Rachel, and I felt a flicker of nervousness under their attentive gazes. Pushing past it, I strode towards the table, the plush chair sinking slightly beneath my weight. The initial small talk flowed easily, filled with light-hearted conversation. Then Alastair's gaze turned serious. "Arthur," he began, "tell me, what is your ultimate goal?" Rachel's blue eyes, mirroring her father's sudden seriousness, locked onto mine. My true goal, a simple life in a peaceful world, felt woefully inadequate in this grand setting. But this world was far from peaceful, and strength seemed to be the only true currency. With a sigh, I voiced the answer that felt most appropriate. "To become strong," I replied. "The strongest, if possible." Alastair's eyebrows shot up in surprise, a playful smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Rachel's jaw dropped slightly, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief. "Ambitious, aren't we?" Alastair chuckled. "There are many powerful mages out there, Arthur. Even among your peers, there are those who have surpassed you. I knew who they were. Lucifer Windward, Ren Kagu, and Jack Blazespout, the main antagonist of this novel, were all stronger than me at the same age as me, especially Lucifer and Jack." Alastair threw me a curveball. Speaking of strength, he said, a mischievous glint in his eyes, "Do you know the history behind the very rank you aspire to achieve, the Radiant Rank?" "Actually, I do," I surprised myself by saying, stepping up to the challenge. "The Radiant Rank came about after we figured out a way to surpass the limitations of the beast-based star mana evolution method. We condensed the equivalent of 7 to 9 stars into the Ascendant and Immortal ranks." Alastair nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Indeed. But do you know what sparked the idea of going beyond the 9-star limit in the first place?" This one stumped me. "The desire for more power, I guess," I admitted, unsure if that was the full answer. The novels hadn't delved into this specific detail. Alastair's smile widened. "Close," he said. The key lies in mythical creatures, dragons, phoenixes, killins, and basilisks. These legendary beings transcended the 9-star limit simply by existing. They became the inspiration for the Radiant rank. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And the first emperor of the Slatemark Empire, Julius Slatemark, played a pivotal role. He managed to bond with a Killin, an incredible feat that provided the foundation for the new mana evolution method we use today. Rachel's jaw dropped. A Killin, she breathed, her voice filled with awe. Indeed, Alasta confirmed, his gaze flickering between us with a hint of amusement. There's something particularly fascinating about these mythical creatures. A Killin is said to possess the ability to read fate itself, and the one it chooses as its master is believed to be destined for greatness, perhaps even ruling the world. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Julius Slatemark, the first Radiant rank mage, was certainly a capable leader. Tragically, his reign was cut short by demonic forces. A cold shiver ran down my spine. So, you're saying a Killin chooses someone destined to rule? Alastair's eyes narrowed. That's the prevailing theory, he replied, and he's nod at me. The novels hadn't delved into why Lucifer was chosen by a Killin. Everyone just assumed it was his raw talent. But what if it was something more? What if the Killin simply recognized the potential for world domination within him? And what did that mean for me? Would a Killin ever appear before me, or was my fate sealed by another's destiny? Regardless, I still had to try. Lucifer couldn't get the Killin anyway, since even when he was worthy, having to innate gifts, there was no space for the Killin. Well, regardless, it was basically a free treasure for me that served no purpose to Lucifer. A flicker of curiosity sparked in Rachel's eyes. What about the other creatures, Father? She inquired. Dragons, phoenixes, anything you can tell us. Alasta chuckled, scratching his head thoughtfully. Well, dragons. You might be familiar with Tiamat, the legendary dragon affiliated with the Vizirian family in the south. Dragons are said to possess an affinity for all elements, making them true masters of magic. Phoenixes, on the other hand, boast the incredible ability to be reborn from even the smallest fragment of their essence. And as for basilisks, well, their power thrives in death and decay itself. He paused, considering his words. In terms of raw strength, dragons are undoubtedly the top contenders, while basilisks are generally considered the weakest. However, the debate rages on regarding the relative power of Killins and phoenixes. Some believe Killins hold the edge, while others maintain they're evenly matched. Enough talk of fate and mythical beasts for one night, he declared. Let's focus on the present and raise a toast to new beginnings, to Arthur's journey, and to the bonds of friendship that unite us. As the final embers of the fire cast long shadows across the room, Alasta stretched with a yawn, his eyes crinkling with fatigue. Well, this has been a delightful evening, he said, pushing himself up from the table. Alastair's gaze then shifted to Rachel, who was gazing intently at me, a flicker of unspoken yearning in her eyes. He cleared his throat, his gaze locking with mine. Arthur, he began, his voice surprisingly serious. I have a question. Yes, I asked, surprised by the intensity of his gaze. Alasta hummed thoughtfully, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then his gaze flicked back to Rachel, a mischievous glint sparking in his eyes. How about we add one person to that little expedition? My eyes widened in surprise, and I glanced at Rachel, who mirrored my expression, her jaw slightly slack from shock. The idea of having her accompany me wasn't unwelcome. She was a top-notch four-circle mage, and her magical expertise would be invaluable. I'd be happy to have her join if she's willing, I replied, trying to mask my surprise. A satisfied smile spread across Alastair's face. Oh, she's willing all right. Just be sure to keep an eye on her, he added, his voice hardening slightly. A playful glint flickered in his eyes, but there was a hint of paternal protectiveness that sent a shiver down my spine. Ah, of course, Alasta, the quintessential overprotective father. How could I forget? Chapter 50, Cobalt Sea. The Creighton estate had become familiar in a way that felt almost unsettling. The structured elegance, the pulse of mana woven through its very walls, the weight of history pressing in at every turn. It was a place of immense power, yet oddly comfortable now. And I was leaving it behind. Rachel and I stood before the grand entrance, bags packed, the morning air crisp with the scent of pine and faint traces of ozone from last night's residual magic experiments. Alasta Creighton, the legendary Archmage, stood before us, arms crossed, his usual composed expression tinged with something unreadable. "I assume you've made all the necessary preparations," he said, though it wasn't a question. His piercing blue gaze lingered on me for a moment longer than it should have, as if peeling apart my intentions with surgical precision. Rachel, standing beside me in travel gear that was somehow both practical and regal, smiled. "Of course, father." Alasta sighed, a rare crack in his otherwise unshakable demeanor. "I trust you, Rachel. But keep in mind that while your strength is considerable, the world beyond these walls is unpredictable." His gaze shifted to me. "And you, Arthur, seem to thrive in unpredictability." I smiled politely. "I try." A flicker of amusement crossed his face before he extended his hand. In his palm lay two enchanted brooches, small but humming with stored mana. "Take these. They will serve as emergency beacons in case something goes awry. The Creighton name holds weight, but it does not shield you from everything." Rachel took them, nodding. "Thank you, father." With that, Alasta straightened. "Go then. And make sure you return stronger." Rachel and I exchanged a glance before stepping through the estate gates. The towering spires of the Creighton family fading into the distance as we descended toward Luminark's bustling transit district. The journey from Luminark to the port city of Valinor was swift. The cutting-edge mag trains powered by mana relays made long-distance travel effortless. The landscape outside the window blurred past in streaks of green and silver, vast open plains giving way to dense forests before the first signs of the sea emerged on the horizon. The scent of fresh seafood and briny salt air clung to the bustling streets of Valinor, the great port city that served as the gateway to the Cobalt Sea. Even in the early morning light, the city was alive with energy dockworkers shouting as they hauled cargo, merchants peddling enchanted trinkets alongside freshly caught fish, and adventurers swaggering through the cobbled streets, boasting of their latest exploits. Rachel and I weaved through the chaos with practiced ease, heading toward our first stop, the Adventurers Guild. A towering structure near the cliffs, its weathered stone facade was marked by an aged but unmistakable emblem across sword and staff, the universal symbol of those who lived by their wits and steel. Inside, the guild hall was a cacophony of clinking mugs, heated debates, and the occasional burst of magic that sent waitstaff scrambling to confiscate drinks from overenthusiastic mages. The air smelled of burnt mana, spiced ale, and something unidentifiably musty, probably a cloak that had seen one too many dungeons. We approached the reception desk, manned by a guild employee who looked like she had long since given up on the idea of customer service. She barely glanced up from her records as we approached. "New applicants," she muttered, her voice laced with disinterest. Rachel, ever the diplomat, gave her best smile. "Not exactly. We're Mythos Academy students, here to acquire our licenses. Helping to test our skills in the Cobalt Sea, you see." That got the woman's attention. Her gaze flicked up, scanning our uniforms, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of something respect. Annoyance pass over her features. Mythos Academy wasn't just any school. It was the best, and we weren't just any students. We were Class 1A. I pulled out the 5-star adventurer license Cecilia had gifted me, letting the silver emblem gleam under the guild's enchanted lights. It was a little excessive, but hey, sometimes status was useful. Rachel nudged me, rolling her eyes, before producing her own credentials. Unlike mine, hers had to be issued on the spot. The moment her name registered in the system, a hush fell over the room. The receptionist, who had previously looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, suddenly sat up straighter. Her mouth opened and closed a few times before she finally stammered, "P. Princess Rachel Creighton." I barely resisted a smirk. there it was. The murmurs spread like wildfire. Adventurers who had previously been minding their own business were now blatantly staring, some whispering excitedly, others looking downright dumbfounded. Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. "Please, no need for formalities," she said, though her tone suggested she already knew that was a lost cause. The receptionist, still wide-eyed, fumbled with her controls before hastily printing out a brand new 5-star license, its surface shimmering with embedded mana signatures. Rachel accepted it with a polite nod before tucking it into her coat. Just as we were about to turn away, a presence entered the room that made the air shift. The Guildmaster. She cut through the crowd with the quiet authority of someone who had nothing to prove. Her formal attire set her apart from the rowdy adventurers, and the way the room instinctively parted for her told me everything I needed to know about her influence. The receptionist practically turned into a statue. G. Guildmaster. A ripple of tension spread through the hall. This was someone powerful. The Guildmaster, a tall woman with a mane of fiery red hair streaked with silver, steadied Rachel with a knowing smile before turning her attention to me. "It's an honor to have you here, Princess Rachel," she said, her voice smooth, measured. Then, after a slight pause, her sharp eyes locked onto me. "And you must be Arthur. I've heard of you." My fingers twitched, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, good things, I hope." Her lips quirked. "That depends." She didn't elaborate. Instead, she gestured toward a private room off to the side, a place clearly meant for higher-ranking discussions. "Why don't we talk somewhere less public?" Rachel and I exchanged a glance. This was unexpected. But if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that powerful people didn't extend private invitations for no reason. We followed her through the hidden doorway, stepping into a luxurious lounge that felt a world apart from the noisy guild hall. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light over plush chairs and elegant woodwork. The Guildmaster gestured for us to sit before pouring 3 cups of steaming tea. "This is where I unwind," she said, settling into a chair across from us. "And where I handle special requests." Rachel sipped her tea, unfazed. "You seem well-informed, Guildmaster." The woman chuckled. "It's my job to be." I set my cup down, getting straight to the point. "We're looking for a 5-star mission to the Isle of Esherbreeze." That got a reaction. Her fingers tapped against the wooden armrest. "That's not exactly a beginner's trip." "We're not beginners," Rachel said evenly. The Guildmaster studied us for a long moment before nodding. "Fair enough. The Isle of Esherbreeze is unpredictable. It's home to rare magical flora, unstable mana zones, and some very aggressive wildlife. Most ships don't go near it without good reason." I leaned forward slightly, "which means there's a mission available, isn't there?" She smirked. "There are a few. One expedition is heading there for artifact retrieval, another for rare beast materials. Both need extra hands. You can choose whichever suits you." Rachel and I shared another look. This was perfect. The Guildmaster leaned back, watching us. "You'll be up against Thunderclaw Griffins, which command the skies with razor wines, and the Tideburn Stalker, an amphibious predator that prefers hunting at night. And, of course, the biggest threat, the Storm Serpent, a 5-star mana beast capable of evolving into a 6-star if given the right conditions." Rachel's eyes gleamed with excitement. "We'll take the mission." The Guildmaster's smirk widened. "Good answer." Back in the main hall, our new mission was officially registered. I transferred the details into my spatial ring while Rachel handled final logistics. The receptionist, who had barely managed to regain her composure, processed the request quickly, issuing us digital maps, supply access, and the official guild certification for the expedition. Moments later, we stepped out of the guild's imposing metal doors, the roar of the city washing over us once more. My mind was already racing ahead. The Storm Serpent, that was my real goal, a mana beast capable of reaching 6-star rank. Chapter 51, Isle of Esherbreeze. The Isle of Esherbreeze was the kind of place that looked like a vacation spot until you read the fine print. The Cobalt Sea was vast and treacherous, but the island itself, Small, barely a speck on the map. With exactly two reasons anyone cared about it: occasionally powerful mana beasts and the unfortunate tendency of said beasts to evolve past the manageable problem threshold. Which was why adventurers were periodically sent in to call anything stupid enough to hit 5-star levels. The guild classified 6-star beasts as city destroyers in training, and no one particularly wanted to see if that policy had room for exceptions. The vessel hummed softly as it glided to a stop at the island's pier, the quiet thrum of mono engines powering down lost beneath the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. Rachel, standing near the railing, rubbed her arms against the salty breeze, watching as two 4-star adventurers hauled metal rods out of the ship's cargo bay and slammed them into the sand, securing the docking. The olive azure breeze stretched before them, deceptively serene. The turquoise sands shimmered faintly, glowing where residual mana from past battles had seeped into the terrain. It was beautiful. In the way all dangerous things were, she knew better than to trust it. Somewhere up in those clear, lazy skies, thunderclaw griffins were circling unseen, waiting for something foolish enough to wander into the open. Somewhere in the dense forests beyond the ridge, the Tideburn stalker was no doubt curling into a nest of damp, rotting leaves, biding its time until nightfall. And if the storm serpent really was here, well, that was the part Rachel preferred not to think about just yet. She glanced over her shoulder. Arthur stood a short distance away, engaged in quiet conversation with two of the veteran adventurers. Even from across the ship's deck, Rachel could tell he was doing that thing again. The thing where he explained something so calmly and methodically that even people twice his age started nodding along before realizing they were being led into a trap of pure logic. She sighed, shaking her head, and hopped onto the pier. The sand crunched beneath her boots, the tiny particles buzzing faintly with leftover magic. Around her, the rest of their expedition disembarked 15 people in total, ranging from hardened guild veterans to junior casters clutching spell guns with the grip of people who were starting to regret their career choices. Gear was unloaded. Weapon checks were completed. There was the usual amount of bravado from the heavily armored crowd and quiet muttering from the less armored, more squishy crowd. The guildmaster had been clear in the mission briefing. Bring weapons suited for aerial attacks griffins. Mono detection equipment Tideburn stalker was sneaky. And a general will to survive Storm Serpent did not care about your hopes and dreams. Arthur finished his conversation and walked up to her, his expression thoughtful, which meant at least 3 plans had already formed in his head. We should set up camp on the ridge inland, he said, voice low but decisive. We'll have a clearer view of griffin activity, and it keeps us away from the lagoon where the Tideburn stalker prefers to hunt. Rachel nodded, already considering the logistics. Good call. We'll also get a better vantage on the coastline, just in case the Storm Serpent rumors aren't just rumors. The words settled between them for a moment. Neither of them particularly wanted to admit how likely that was. Around them, the group got to work unloading supplies, compact defense pylons, thermal sleeping bags, drones programmed to scan for mana activity, and, of course, rations that looked suspiciously like flavored bricks. It was late afternoon by the time they made it to the ridge, the sky painted in faint hues of gold and blue as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The air hummed with ambient mana, a subtle current that made Rachel's skin tingle. The sands near the crest shifted in color every so often, pulsing gently in waves. Something about the place put her on edge. Arthur stood at the edge of the ridge, arms folded as he stared out over the coastline like he could see all the dangers lurking just beneath the surface. Which, given how his mind worked, he probably could. She walked up beside him. You're thinking too much. Arthur blinked, pulled from whatever mental battlefield he'd been assembling. I was considering the best route for scouting tomorrow, he admitted. We've got griffins up high, a stalker lurking in the dark, and a serpent that may or may not be waiting in the lagoon. It's going to take careful planning. Rachel smirked, resting a hand on his shoulder. Arthur, she gave him a very deliberate look, one step at a time. If you burn out before we even start, I'll have to carry you back to the ship, and I really don't want to do that. He gave her a flat look, but the tension in his shoulders eased just slightly. Noted. Rachel turned her gaze back to the sea. The water was to calm. The breeze carried a faint charge, like static before a thunderstorm. She had a very bad feeling about this. The expedition split at dawn, the early morning light stretching long golden streaks across the Cobalt Sea. The mission breakdown was straightforward. One group would scout the cliffs for griffin roosts, another would patrol the coastal waters for the Tyburn stalker, and the largest contingent Rachel's would push into the island's core to scan for anomalies. That was the polite way of saying find out what's waiting to kill us before it actually does. Arthur, of course, had joined her group. Not as co-lead, no. He had smoothly nudged that particular responsibility onto Naveer. A seasoned 5-star adventurer with the charisma and experience to keep a bunch of restless fighters from tearing each other apart. Rachel didn't question it. Arthur had a habit of making people think his ideas were their own. If it meant he could step back and see everything at once, well, that was just how he played the long game. The island stretched before them in eerie, undisturbed silence. Rolling dunes shimmered under the morning sun, the turquoise sands glittering like crushed gemstones. It was beautiful in the way all dangerous things were. Rachel adjusted her lightweight tactical jacket, scanning the skies for griffins. Nothing. That was somehow worse than seeing them. They moved forward at a steady pace, cutting across ridges and rocky outcroppings. Arthur was at the back, checking his scanning devices and murmuring occasional instructions to Naveer. Rachel caught fragments of his quiet orders, things like circle around the next dune or watch for distortions. Could be an illusion field. It wasn't paranoia. It was calculated paranoia, which was an entirely different thing. But no griffins attacked, no Tyburn stalkers slithered out from the shallows, nothing. Just an ever-present feeling that something was watching. By midday, they stumbled upon the first sign of life, or rather, the absence of it. A griffin nest, perched on a jagged outcrop overlooking a brackish pool. The remains of a nest lay in disarray-torn feathers, half-eaten fish, shattered eggshells. Rachel crouched near the edge, brushing her fingers over deep claw marks gouged into the rock. Something chased it off, she muttered. Naveer squinted at the mess. Might have been another griffin. Rachel shook her head. Then where's the body? She gestured toward the empty sky. Griffins don't just abandon their nests unless the alternative is worse. Arthur wasn't standing next to them. Wait, Arthur wasn't there. Rachel's heart dropped. She twisted around, searching the group, her voice sharp. Where's Arthur? One of the adventurers, a younger man still breaking in his gear, pointed toward the tree line. He said he was gonna check something in the eastern thicket a while ago. Rachel's stomach churned. A while ago. Her feet were already moving before she could process it. She barely registered Naveer cursing under his breath, calling for the group to hold position as she broke into a sprint toward the tree line. She found him 5 minutes later, half slumped against a rock, clutching his ribs. Her heart nearly stopped. Arthur, she skidded to a stop beside him, falling to one knee. His face was pale, a bruise already forming on his jaw. His left sleeve was torn, blood seeping through where something had raked across his arm. The scorch marks along the grass near him told her he'd used flame lance recently. What the hell happened? She demanded. Arthur gave a small, pained exhale, something between a laugh and a wince. I ran into a 4-star beast, didn't go exactly as planned. Rachel's eyes narrowed. You fought a 4-star beast alone? Are you out of your mind? He gave a tired shrug. Wasn't planning on fighting it. Just scouting. It saw me first. That's the worst excuse I've ever heard. She pushed his hand aside and grabbed a small vial of healing serum from her belt pouch, her movements brisk but careful. I swear, if you weren't already injured, I'd strangle you myself. What kind of idiot goes off alone in unknown territory? Arthur winced as she pressed a cloth against his wound, dabbing away the excess blood. An idiot who now has valuable information on the local fauna. Rachel gave him a flat look. Do you want a medal? Or would you prefer not bleeding out in the middle of nowhere? Arthur had the audacity to smirk. If you've got a medal, I wouldn't say no. Rachel let out an exasperated sigh. You are the most infuriating person I have ever met. Still, her hands moved with practiced efficiency. She uncorked the healing vial and poured it over his wounds. The liquid hissed on contact, the mana-infused serum knitting the tissue back together. Arthur flinched but said nothing. She sat back, glaring at him. Explain to me exactly what happened. And don't leave anything out. Arthur shifted, adjusting his position with a wince. I was tracking movement near the eastern ridge. Thought I saw something large moving through the brush. Turned out to be a Void Fang panther. It wasn't alone. Rachel inhaled sharply. Void Fang panthers. Fast, ruthless, intelligent, normally hunted in pairs, sometimes even trios. Arthur shouldn't be alive right now. You're telling me you fought to Void Fang panthers? She asked, voice flat. Arthur tilted his head. Technically, I fought one. The other got distracted when I set its partner on fire. Rachel pinched the bridge of her nose. You are so lucky I'm not letting you bleed out for your stupidity. Arthur chuckled weakly. Duly noted. Rachel studied him for a long moment. The bruises, the shallow cuts that had already started healing, the faint tremor in his arms from mana exertion. She sighed. Can you walk? She asked. Arthur nodded. Yeah. Just slowly. Rachel stood, offering him a hand. Come on. Let's get you back before Navir decides to leave you for dead out of sheer frustration. Arthur took her hand, gripping it firmly as she pulled him upright. He staggered slightly, and Rachel instantly moved closer to support his weight. Next time, she muttered, guiding him toward the ridge, you tell me before you do something this reckless. Arthur's voice was soft but amused. I'll consider it. Rachel shot him a warning glare. Arthur. He sighed, the smirk vanishing. Fine. Next time, I'll tell you. Rachel nodded, satisfied for now. Chapter 52, Storm Serpent 1. The expedition pressed deeper inland after lunch, the landscape shifting from rolling dunes to jagged azure-laced spires jutting from the sand like fractured glass. The further they went, the more unnatural the terrain became, twisting rock formations crackling faintly with static, strange humming vibrations pulsing beneath their feet. Then the ground trembled. A brief but unmistakable quake rippled through the sand, sending loose pebbles skittering down slopes. A few adventurers stumbled, gripping their weapons instinctively. Rachel snapped her staff up, scanning the horizon. No attack came, no monsters burst from the shadows. Just an unsettling silence stretching to long. Just tectonic movement, Vera, a young caster, asked, trying to sound casual. Rachel didn't answer immediately. She flicked her gaze to Arthur, watching as he examined a scanning device strapped to his wrist. The display flickered, numbers shifting rapidly, unreadable from her angle. He frowned, tapping the screen before turning to Navir, the veteran adventurer who had been reluctantly roped into co-leading. They spoke in hushed tones. Rachel, curious, wandered closer. ... Pressure changes are focused here, Arthur murmured. It's gathering. It being, Navir prompted. Arthur didn't answer outright. We should establish an observation point here. He deflected, glancing toward an outcropping that overlooked a shallow depression in the center of the spire cluster. We'll get better readings and a higher vantage if anything moves. Navir nodded and barked orders to the group. Rachel tilted her head, watching Arthur carefully. There was something about the way he phrased things, making decisions sound like collaborative efforts rather than personal strategies. It was subtle, but she'd started noticing it more. The adventurers climbed the ridge and peered down. A circular basin stretched below, surrounded by jagged crystals that arced with faint trails of blue lightning. Rachel's grip on her staff tightened. That wasn't just static discharge. That was Storm Serpent territory. The group shifted uneasily. Some reached for their weapons, anticipating an attack, but the basin was empty. No coiled serpent, no immediate threat, just the lingering electricity snapping in the air like an unfinished sentence. Rachel swallowed. The guildmaster had warned that the storm serpent could evolve if it absorbed enough mana. What if they had stumbled into its nesting ground right before the transformation? Arthur remained unreadable, his eyes flicking across the perimeter. "We set up observation wards here," he said. "If it returns, we'll know." No one disagreed. Soon, they were securing small, high-tech ward pylons into the sand, each designed to map mana flows and detect large creatures. Rachel anchored each rune with her light gift, ensuring the wards stabilized. Arthur directed placements subtly, offering suggestions like angle that one north or place one near that spire. Rachel assumed he was optimizing coverage. She didn't realize he was funneling something. As dusk fell, the wind picked up, bringing a sharp ozone tang. Rachel paced near the perimeter, scanning for movement beside her. Vera shivered. "It's too quiet," Vera muttered. "Where are the griffins? Or the Tyburn stalker? Feels like the whole island's just holding its breath." Rachel had been thinking the same thing. Shortly before midnight, the wards hummed in unison. Rachel jerked to attention, adrenaline snapping through her veins. She and Vera rushed to check the holographic displays on the pylons. The runes pulsed aggressively, reacting to a massive mana presence nearby. A hush fell over the camp. And then a tremor, not a violent shake, but a slow, deliberate shift, like something beneath the island was stretching. Rachel turned toward Arthur, but he was already moving. He slipped away from the wards, his face partially obscured by the glow of a crystal spire. She opened her mouth to call out, but hesitated. Maybe he was checking something. Maybe he was investigating. She turned back to the group, unaware that he wasn't investigating so much as adjusting. The quake deepened. Adventurers scrambled, some shouting, but nothing attacked. No beast revealed itself. The ground simply continued shifting, like something vast was coiling below the surface. Rachel's pulse hammered in her ears. "We need to move," she ordered. Navir jogged toward her, panting, "Lady Rachel, it's bad." Tunnels collapsed near the southern perimeter. "We're cut off from the others." Her stomach dropped. Any sign of the serpent? Navir hesitated. "One of my men swears he saw a tail vanishing into a crevice." Rachel swore under her breath. "Then it's moving." Gathering power, she turned toward the swirling dust and lightning in the distance. Arthur was nowhere to be seen. She bit back frustration. He had a habit of disappearing at key moments, and this time, she didn't have time to find him before disaster hit. She ordered a rescue detail, sending adventurers to retrieve the trapped squads. But every time they approached the central ring, fresh quakes forced them back. At one point, she swore she glimpsed something massive, coiled in the haze. A shimmering azure form. The air crackled around it, growing denser, heavier, charged. Rachel's breath came short. They weren't just tracking the serpent anymore. They were in the middle of its ascension. Underscore? The plan had to be perfect. No room for error, no loose ends. I had spent the entire day setting this up, piece by piece, without anyone realizing what I was actually doing. Feeding a 5-star beast wasn't as simple as throwing it food. It had to be the right kind of food. The kind that carried mana, the kind that would push it over the edge and trigger its final evolution. And the best fuel for that? Other 5-star beasts. The storm serpent was a territorial predator, but it wasn't the strongest creature on the island, not yet. There were still other apex predators lurking, each of them competing for dominance, each of them siphoning away mana that should have been the serpent's alone. I had to remove them from the equation. And so I did. Under the guise of scouting runs, I disappeared at key intervals, slipping away from the main group just long enough to track and hunt the strongest creatures on the island. Thunderclaw griffins, Tyburn stalkers, even a rogue azure fang that had no business being here. I made sure to come back bruised and battered, making it look like I had barely survived a scrap with a 4-star beast each time. I let the others patch me up, let Rachel sigh in exasperation, let Navir shake his head like I was an overeager fool who didn't know his limits. In truth, I had been delivering fresh kills straight to the serpent's feeding grounds. It had been cautious at first. Even as I pushed prey toward its lair, it took its time coiling in the shadows, studying the battlefield like an ancient tactician. But hunger mixed with raw, surging mana was a powerful motivator. And as I continued my quiet, methodical culling of the competition, it began to understand. This food was for it. This was its land, its territory. It ate. It consumed, tearing through beast after beast, drinking deep of their mana-rich cores, growing stronger with each kill. And as the day wore on, I saw the shift happening. The scales darkened, taking on an iridescent sheen. The electricity in the air grew denser, the humidity shifting as ambient mana folded in on itself, drawn toward the serpent like an unseen tide. It was close now. Too close. By nightfall, the others were completely unaware of what was happening beneath their feet. Rachel had her hands full keeping the squads organized, while the adventurers remained focused on shoring up defenses against the next wave of threats that would never come. Because I had already silenced them. Everything was in place. And then, in the dead of night, it happened. The first pulse of true evolution. A deep, resonant drum rippled through the ground, shaking the very bones of the island. The air crackled, alive with an electric storm that hadn't yet been born. The serpent was changing. From my vantage point, hidden among the jagged spires overlooking the basin, I watched the culmination of my work unfold. I saw the first arc of unnatural lightning, not from the sky, but from within the beast itself, shooting upward, shattering a crystal spire into molten slag. I heard the deep, guttural sound of a creature shedding its past weakness, stepping into the next stage of its existence. A roar, primal, raw, absolute. The basin collapsed inward, swallowed by a maelstrom of lightning and sand as the storm serpent ascended. It was no longer a 5-star beast. It had become something far, far worse. And nobody had any idea that I had just made it happen. Chapter 53, Storm Serpent 2. I moved through the battlefield with precise, calculated steps. Fear, as always, was a useful tool and indicator of what mattered, but it was not something I let control me. The Abyssal Tide Serpent, now a fully evolved 6-star beast, was beyond anything that should exist on this island. Its mana pulsed through the air in rhythmic, thunderous waves, the storm above twisting in sync with its breathing. The sea itself rose and fell unnaturally, answering its master's silent command. I had seen this in the novel. I had read how Lucifer faced it, how he overwhelmed it with sheer force. But I was not Lucifer. I didn't have overwhelming power. What I had was foresight, strategy, a mind that could see 10 steps ahead. And I needed to use everything to get out of this alive. Lightning speared down from the heavens, vaporizing chunks of the battlefield. The remaining adventurers were scattering, retreating where they could, buying time with mana barriers and defensive formations. They were strong, but they were not enough. Even at 6-star, the Abyssal Tide Serpent was refining itself, sharpening its power. It was on the verge of something greater, an existence beyond what the adventurers could handle. The Warp Gate, that was my objective. I adjusted my movements, sprinting across the uneven ground, dodging where necessary, slipping into shadows when needed. The adventurers were too focused on the battle to question me to ask why a Mythos Academy student was still moving instead of fighting. That was exactly what I needed. I reached a shattered outcrop, crouching low as I surveyed the battlefield. The serpent loomed above, its massive coils cutting through the sky, arcs of lightning dancing across its form. Its eyes scanned the battlefield, searching for prey, searching for the source of its evolution. Because it knew. It knew something had changed. It had felt the careful feeding, the sudden influx of mana-rich prey. It was aware in a way beasts should not be. And its eyes flicked toward me. I reacted immediately, vanishing from my position. Not running, not panicking, moving, calculating. This was the worst-case scenario, and yet, it was also exactly what I had prepared for. I knew from the novel that the serpent could evolve further only if it was allowed to absorb even more mana. That meant it wouldn't attack recklessly. It would hunt strategically, which gave me an opening. A thunderous crash split the sky behind me as the serpent obliterated the rock I had just occupied. Too close! I surged forward, pushing my body to its limit, weaving through the destruction. I had minutes, maybe seconds before it locked onto me again. The gate had to be close. I knew where it was. I had memorized the layout. The novel had described it as a half-submerged relic hidden in the ruins near the eastern cliffs. The adventurers had scouted a ruin earlier. That was my destination. A high-pitched whistle split the air, an adventurer calling for reinforcements. I glanced back just long enough to see two of them launch 4 circle spells directly at the beast. The abyssal tide serpent didn't even flinch. One spell was caught midair, shattered by the sheer force of its ambient mana. The other detonated harmlessly against its scales. The adventurers had no idea what they were fighting. I clenched my teeth. Focus. I found the ruins. The stone arches jutted out from the ground, covered in moss and residual mana. The faint humming in the air confirmed that this was it. I dashed forward, ignoring the way my body screamed in protest. The storm surged, wind howling, the pressure dropping fast. The serpent had realized where I was going. It was coming. I placed my hand on the ruins, feeling for the mana flow. It had to be here. A flicker of energy beneath my fingertips, a faint pulse. I exhaled, got it. The warp gate shimmered, faint at first, then stabilizing as I poured my own mana into it. The structure groaned, ancient mechanisms activating. Behind me, the air boiled with lightning. I turned just in time to see the serpent's maw open wide, a charged bolt of energy forming within. It had decided I was prey. I made my move. God flash! I disappeared in a crack of thunder, reappearing just within the warp gate's radius. The serpent's attack obliterated the space where I had been. The gate activated, and the world vanished. Underscore. Rachel's wings of light flared to life the moment the abyssal tide serpent struck. The force of its mana alone sent shockwaves across the battlefield, upending the sands of the Isle of Asherbreeze in massive, rolling quakes. The sky darkened, storm clouds roiling in response to its presence, the very air charged with static. She barely had time to process the sheer scale of the beast-an entity that shouldn't have existed on this island. 6-star beasts belonged in disaster reports, not mission briefings. Everyone fall back into formation, she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The adventurers responded immediately. Those with flight capabilities took to the air, circling to keep their distance from the serpent's devastating strikes. Mages hurriedly erected mana barriers, defensive pylons activating with flickering arcs of energy. Sharpshooters aimed their mana-enhanced rifles and spell guns, waiting for openings in its thick scales. Rachel didn't wait. She launched herself forward, propelled by the sheer force of her gift. Light exploded around her, her body a streak of gold against the serpent's vast coils. Saintess mode was fully activated, heightening her perception, increasing her speed beyond normal limits. Every detail sharpened a subtle rippling of its scales, the gathering of mana at its core, the faint distortions in the air where its next attack was forming. A 4-circle spell took shape in her hands. Solar Lance! A beam of pure light shot forward, striking the serpent's hide. The impact burned through layers of mana-infused scales, sending a ripple of damage across its body. The beast hissed, not in pain, but in acknowledgement. Its slit-pupiled eyes flicked toward her, recognizing her as a threat. Rachel gritted her teeth. Good, that means I have its attention. Another adventurer, a lightning mage named Kiran, dashed to her side. Your Highness, we need reinforcements. We can't hold this thing for long. Rachel didn't hesitate. Send an emergency signal to Velener. Any available high-rank adventurers. We need them here now. Kiran nodded, his hands already moving over his communicator, a pulse of mana transmitting the distress signal. Then, another call came through. Rachel barely caught the words over the din of battle, but the moment she did, everything inside her froze. Arthur was hit. Her entire focus fractured. The battle faded for a single second. She whirled toward the adventurer who had relayed the information, her heart lodged in her throat, where her voice was sharp, urgent. The ruins, the woman Vera reported breathlessly. He was trying to get to the waypoint, but got caught in the serpent's last strike. I don't know if he's. Rachel moved before she finished speaking. Golden wings flared. The sky cracked as she surged toward the ruins faster than she had ever moved before. She didn't doubt him, not for a second. Arthur wasn't reckless. Arthur wasn't someone who acted without reason. But he had been hit. And if there was even a chance he was still down there, she had to find him. The abyssal tide serpent let out another roar, mana surging in all directions. Rachel forced herself to focus even as panic clawed at her. Arthur had been hit, but he was not dead. He couldn't be. Chapter 54. Lucent Harmony 1. The teleportation wasn't smooth. It never was. Even when executed perfectly, spatial shifts left the body disoriented, tumbling across unfamiliar terrain as reality reasserted itself. I hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop against something solid, cool to the touch, slightly luminescent. I groaned, forcing my limbs to obey as the last traces of distortion faded. A forest, not just any forest, a place painted in deep royal purples, shimmering like an oil slick beneath an unseen light source. The trees weren't the verdant green of nature, but something otherworldly, their bioluminescent veins pulsing with energy. A thin mist clung to the air, carrying a faint, electric hum. The magnetic pull of the forest's mana was intoxicating, rich and concentrated, as if I had stepped into a place where magic itself was alive. A rustling sound cut through the stillness, the soft tread of something large moving with deliberate grace. I twisted around, body still aching from my earlier injuries, forcing my senses to focus. How had I not noticed it before? Then she stepped forward. Luna. A Qilin, not the creature of myths from my old world, but something far more potent. Her form radiated an ethereal luminescence, a creature sculpted from the very concept of divinity itself. Her mane shimmered, cascading silver light through the trees as if she carried the remnants of a dying star in every strand. The ground trembled subtly beneath her hooves, not from force, but from presence. The air around her thrummed with raw, uncontained power, the kind that warped reality by its very existence. I had seen strength before. I had stood before Lucifer. I had watched Alasta Creighton demonstrate magic so precise it felt like a law of nature. But Luna, she was something else, something unrestrained. Her eyes met mine, and I felt like I was standing at the edge of an ocean, staring into depths so vast they could swallow me whole. How peculiar! Her voice wasn't a sound but an understanding, something woven directly into the fabric of my thoughts. I had no words. She tilted her head slightly, amusement flickering across her celestial features. I had expected the other one to arrive here, albeit in a few months, not you. The words clicked immediately. Lucifer, I breathed. The one destined for kingship, Luna mused, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. Yet, it is you who stands before me. A pause. The flicker of a frown ghosted across her expression, something so fleeting it barely registered. You are unexpected. A chill ran through me, though not from fear. That was new. Everything about me was wrong to her, an anomaly she hadn't foreseen. In all my time here, with all the advantages of knowing the future, I had never been confronted by something or someone who could see the threads of fate and still not see me. A shiver of something I couldn't name crawled down my spine. Luna stepped forward, closing the distance between us. I didn't move, couldn't move. Her gaze held me still, dissecting me with a scrutiny that felt less like looking and more like understanding. A moment later, I felt weightless, lifted effortlessly by an unseen force. She was healing me. The bruises faded, the soreness in my ribs eased, the remnants of the abyssal tide serpent's strike washing away as if they had never been. Intriguing, Luna murmured, stepping even closer. Her eyes, twin nebulae swirling with unreadable depths, locked onto mine. You are not bound by the constraints of destiny like others. I swallowed hard. What does that mean? It means your story is yours alone to write, she said simply, as if stating a fact of nature. You are not woven into fate. You walk outside of it. A weight settled over me, something deep, something foundational. It had never truly occurred to me what my existence in this world meant. I had assumed I was just replacing Arthur, taking his role in the grand scheme of things. But Luna wasn't talking about replacing. She was talking about severance, about existing beyond the cosmic blueprint. So Luna said, stepping back, smiling, "I shall take a chance on you." There was no warning. Her fingers lightly touched my forehead, and suddenly, my knees buckled. My soul felt like it was being stretched, examined, unraveled, and rewoven all at once. My vision blurred, my consciousness teetering on the edge of an abyss. A voice not Luna's whispered at the edge of my awareness. "Huh? That's different. He wasn't supposed to." Oh well, no use resisting. I tried to grasp at something, anything, but reality slipped away before I could form a thought. When I woke, I was lying in a clearing, my head pillowed against something soft. A hand cool, gentle threaded through my hair. The sensation was so foreign, so comforting, that I almost didn't react. Then I realized who it was. Luna. Not in her celestial beast form, but as a woman. Her human guise was just as breathtaking, her long violet hair cascading in soft waves, her golden eyes half-lidded with amusement. Even now, she radiated power, an undeniable force that bent the world around her. Yet, in this moment, she seemed almost playful. I blinked, still groggy. "Why? You humans enjoy this, do you not?" she asked, tilting her head in curiosity. "A lap pillow, I believe it is called." I had no words. A literal divine beast was giving me a lap pillow. Luna chuckled, brushing a stray lock of hair from my forehead. "You have changed, you know. The power within you has shifted." Power. I reached inward and felt it, a warmth, foreign but familiar, etched into my very core. Her beast will. Luna's essence, now part of me. "Try activating Lucent Harmony," she instructed softly. "It is the key to wielding my power." I closed my eyes, reaching for the insignia imprinted onto my mana core. Silver light bloomed, spreading through my veins, my senses sharpening beyond anything I had ever known. I could feel the world. The mana in the air, the pulsing of life in the distance, the energy threading between every living thing. I gasped this. This was astral clarity, a level of perception far beyond my rank. Luna smiled. "Now, tap into the elements. The ones you have never touched before." I reached again, and the world tilted. Time rippled. Gravity buckled under my awareness. Light and dark coiled at my fingertips, balanced in delicate harmony. Luna watched, nodding in approval. "You have potential, but you are unrefined. You will need time to master it." She slowly rose, and in an instant, her celestial form returned. The Kiln loomed over me once more, a guardian of the heavens, her presence immense yet strangely familiar now. Luna stepped back, her celestial eyes narrowing as if seeing me for the first time not as an anomaly, but as something fundamentally wrong. I could feel it too. The warmth of her beast will settled into my core, but it didn't integrate smoothly. It slammed into my mana circuits like water forcing itself through cracked pipes, meeting resistance at every turn. My body shuddered, my breathing sharp and uneven. And then Luna frowned. "What have you done to yourself?" Her voice wasn't just curious, it was concerned. I barely had the presence of mind to answer, but the look on her face, the intensity made me force out words. "I trained." "You broke yourself," she corrected, stepping closer, eyes scanning me like she was reading the very structure of my being. "Your circuits, they have been shattered and rebuilt over and over. That is not normal. That is unnatural." I clenched my jaw. It worked, didn't it? Luna exhaled sharply. "Yes, but at what cost?" Before I could answer, a surge rippled through me. The beast will wasn't just settling in, it was forcing its way through, rushing into every fracture, filling every broken piece of my mana system like molten gold into shattered porcelain. My core, already stretched thin from the brutal training I had endured, snapped the final barrier without hesitation. High silver rank. The change was instantaneous. My perception exploded, my mana stabilizing into something sharper, more controlled, yet more wild. My entire body pulsed with newfound strength, the sensation of raw mana finally flowing unrestrained. Luna's eyes widened, not in fear, not in awe, but in understanding. You were not supposed to reach this level yet. Her voice was quieter, her gaze calculating. And yet you did, because you forced your body beyond its limits, not once, not twice, but repeatedly. I met her stare, breathing steady now. I don't have the luxury of waiting. A beat of silence. Then Luna laughed, a quiet, knowing sound that carried an edge of something unreadable. You are either the most determined human I have ever met, she said, her voice laced with something akin to amusement, or the most self-destructive. I didn't correct her. Both were true. She shook her head, the glow of her form flickering slightly. Very well, let us see if your recklessness will serve you. And with that, her presence fused with mine, and the voice she left me with echoed in my mind. Now, show me what you are truly capable of. Chapter 55, Lucent Harmony 2. The abyssal tide serpent was beyond anything I had faced before. It towered over us, coiled like a storm-given form, its body undulating through the air with unnatural grace. Each shift of its massive frame sent tremors through the sand, cracking the few crystalline spires that remained intact. The mana radiating from it was overwhelming, thick, electric, suffocating. I had fought powerful beasts before. I had stood in battles where magic and steel clashed with terrifying intensity. But this was something else. I could feel the other adventurers behind me faltering. Some were still holding their ground, gripping their weapons with grim determination, but others were already taking slow steps back, their instincts screaming at them to run. I tightened my grip on my staff and took a breath, setting myself, hold the line. My voice rang out over the battlefield, cutting through the chaos. We cannot let it advance. The serpent's glowing eyes flickered toward me. A moment later, it reared back, its entire body tensing. It struck. I barely had time to throw up a barrier before the sheer force of its lunge sent me skidding backward. My boots carved trenches into the sand, the impact rattling my bones. The barrier held, but just barely. The cracks that spiderwebbed across its golden surface told me everything I needed to know. I wouldn't last. Not alone. I pressed my comm link, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Nuvir, status report. Static crackled for a second before his voice cut through. Bad. Real bad. We're losing ground. That thing, he hesitated, then swore. Rachel, we just got word Arthur was hit. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? Displaced serpent threw him halfway across the battlefield. Is he alive? My voice was sharp, urgent. He was moving, but he's alone. Arthur, alone, injured. I clenched my teeth, my mind torn between instincts. If I left now, the adventurers would falter. But if Arthur was hurt? The serpent let out a deafening screech, the ground beneath me vibrating with its fury. It was charging another attack. A concentrated sphere of water mana began forming between its fangs, twisting and writhing like a captured storm. No time. I pushed mana into my core, feeling my gift surge to life. Golden light unfurled behind me, the familiar weight of my celestial wings pressing against my back. My vision sharpened, the battlefield slowing to something I could grasp, something I could control. But even with my gift, I knew the truth. I couldn't hold it back forever. Even at my strongest, even with my spells, my barriers, my light magicae wasn't enough. Not against something like this. I needed something more. I needed. A wave of mana slammed into the battlefield. It was so sudden, so immense, that my body reacted before my mind did. I turned instinctively, my breath catching in my throat. The air itself had changed, thickened, supercharged with something vast, something raw and untamed. For a split second, I thought another six-star beast had emerged. that the worst-case scenario had arrived. But then my eyes found the source, and I froze. Arthur, standing atop a fractured crystal spire, silver light crackling around him like living electricity. This wasn't the Arthur I knew. The weight of his mana pressed against me like a tidal wave, thick enough to distort the space around him. His azure eyes glowed in the dim light, the power radiating from him suffocating in its intensity. He exhaled, and the air trembled, the sheer force of his presence drowning out even the serpent's suffocating aura. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. This wasn't possible. Arthur was strong, talented, a tactical genius. But this was something different, something on an entirely different level. I felt the adventurers behind me reacting, their voices caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. Someone whispered something, maybe his name, maybe a curse, but I barely heard it. Because I understood exactly what had happened. He awakened his gift. He had to have. Nothing else explained this. No normal human, no matter how skilled, could release this kind of raw energy without a gift. It was too innate, too natural, too much a part of him. Arthur had stepped beyond his limits, and I was here to witness it. The battlefield stilled. Even the abyssal tide serpent hesitated. Arthur stood there, gazing down at us, his face unreadable. His mana flared and twisted, the silver light wrapping around his arms, coiling in controlled arcs. I barely had time to process it before he moved. 1 second he was on the spire, the next he was beside me. I sucked in a breath, barely registering the speed at which he had closed the distance. "You're alive," I whispered, half in disbelief. He smirked slightly, but his eyes were sharp, not the easiest fight I've been in. I didn't know what to say. His presence, his power, it was overwhelming. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. Amazing. That was the only word my mind could grasp as I stared at Arthur's form, wreathed in silver light. When a gift awakened, mana changed, adapted, became something uniquely personal. My own was golden, no matter which element I used. Cecilia's burned crimson, vibrant and dangerous, but Arthur's. His mana was silver, bright and fluid, shifting like quicksilver in motion, a force of pure potential. And he wielded it as though he had always been meant to. "I can't beat it alone," he said, eyes locked onto mine, steady despite the chaos still crackling around us. For a moment, my vision betrayed me, his form blurred, and another memory imposed itself. A different battlefield, a different boy. Lucifer. The first time he had truly shown his power, when the world had gasped and declared him the greatest talent of our generation. I remembered the way he had stood, proud and unshaken, the weight of expectation settled on his shoulders as naturally as breathing. "Rachel," Lucifer had said to me then, his voice like a prophecy, "be my light." Words that would make any girl's heart flutter. But they hadn't made mine, because I wasn't naive. Lucifer's eyes held no warmth, no affection, only expectation. He didn't see Rachel Creighton, the girl, the friend. He saw the saintess. A title, a role, a piece of the grand machine that would carry him to greatness. He was the second hero. The world had already decided. And I, as the saintess, was supposed to illuminate his path. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to be an accessory to someone else's legend, a guiding light chained to the purpose others had assigned me. I wanted to be more than a reflection in someone else's story. That was why I had chosen Arthur instead of Lucifer at the freshman ball. A small rebellion, maybe, but one that mattered to me. And now, again, my instincts screamed at me, trust him. I met Arthur's gaze. There was no expectation in those silver eyes. No prophecy, no demand. Just a simple truth. He couldn't do this alone. "Then let's do it together," I said. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt like I was choosing my own path. Chapter 56, Abyssal Tide Serpent. The abyssal tide serpent coiled before me, its massive form shifting like a living storm given flesh. Scales shimmered with an unnatural sheen, reflecting the deep blues and violent greens of the charged ocean behind it. Its serpentine body undulated, rising high above the battlefield, water dripping in sheets from its elongated fangs. The air stank of salt and ozone, the aftershock of its earlier lightning-infused attack still thrumming in my bones. Rachel stood at my side, her golden aura crackling in defiance, her staff glowing with imbued light. "We're not winning this," she muttered. I exhaled, steadying my grip on my sword. "Not the point. We just need to hold." The abyssal tide serpent let out a guttural, rumbling hiss, the sound vibrating through the sand beneath our feet. Then it struck. It moved faster than anything that size should be able to. A blur of shifting scales, a rush of water drawn in its wake. I barely had time to react. Lucent harmony. The moment I activated it, the world expanded. My senses stretched, catching the finer threads of mana that swirled around us. The air, thick with the serpent's elemental energy, no longer felt suffocating. It was something I could control. The battlefield became clearer. Each movement slowed in my perception, like I was glimpsing fractions of a second ahead of time. The serpent lunged, and I stepped forward, blade rising in an arc. God flash! Silver light trailed the blade as I twisted my form, shifting my balance with the finesse of a blade dancer. The moment my sword met the serpent's advancing fangs, the world erupted in sparks. The force sent me skidding back, feet digging into the wet sand. My arms screamed from the impact, but I had stopped the attack. Rachel seized the opening. She swept her staff forward, golden light condensing into a blinding radiant lance. The divine spear shot forward, aimed directly at the serpent's eye. The beast screeched, its massive coils writhing as the golden light singed its form. But it wasn't enough. With a vicious twist of its body, it summoned a tidal force that slammed into us like a crashing wave. The impact knocked me off my feet, sending me tumbling across the battlefield. The moment I hit the ground, I rolled back into a crouch, spitting out sand. Rachel had already recovered, her golden wings of mana flickering as she hovered just above the battlefield. She wasn't flying, she couldn't. Not yet, but she was manipulating the ambient mana to lighten her steps, allowing her a kind of aerial mobility. I took a deep breath. I could feel it. Lucent harmony was still active, still amplifying my awareness, still expanding my magic. "Arthur," Rachel shouted, "hit it now." I didn't hesitate. I reached out, and for the first time, I wielded 5-circle magic. Lucent storm. Lightning coalesced around my body, bright silver threads arcing through my blade. But it wasn't just lightning. It was time magic, woven into the attack, speeding up the charge, amplifying the conduction through the air. With a single step, I disappeared, reappeared above the serpent's exposed back, and struck. Silver lightning cascaded down my blade as I carved into the beast's hide. The impact sent a concussive blast rippling outward, sending up geysers of sand and water. The serpent howled, its massive body twisting in agony, but it didn't go down. Rachel followed up instantly, launching another barrage of light-infused arrows that detonated along the serpent's length. The explosions rocked the battlefield, forcing the beast back, its coils slamming into the ocean and sending towering waves surging outward. I barely had time to breathe before the counterattack came. Rachel and I moved as one. I reached for my mana, channeling Lucent harmony to its peak. Rachel activated her Saintess gift, her golden aura flaring brighter than ever. We attacked together. I surged forward, blade flashing through elemental turbulence, carving through stray bolts of lightning, dodging collapsing gravitational wells. Rachel fired spell after spell, her arrows of light bending through the wind, seeking the serpent's vulnerable points. We hit it over and over, pushing it back, but no matter how hard we struck, no matter how fast we moved, it did not fall. And then it roared. The sky collapsed. A maelstrom of magic erupted from the abyssal tide serpent, the sheer force knocking me off my feet. I slammed into the sand, my vision going white for a moment. When I struggled to my feet, Rachel was beside me, breathing hard, her form wavering slightly from the sheer exhaustion of using her gift at full power. The serpent still stood, wounded, but very much alive. We weren't enough. And that was when I felt it. A new presence. Multiple, actually. Powerful, beyond even Rachel. The reinforcements had arrived. Figures descended from the sky, the air shimmering with their immense mana. One of them, a tall man wreathed in lightning, raised a single hand and the heavens themselves answered. A six-circle spell. The skies erupted, true lightning struck, a force far beyond what Rachel or I could conjure, piercing the abyssal-tide serpent straight through its core. The beast screeched, its body writhing in agony. And at that moment, I exhaled, my legs nearly giving out. We had done it. We had held long enough. The battle was over. The abyssal-tide serpent lay motionless, its colossal form still sparking with residual energy from the devastating final blow. Reinforcements moved in to clean up the remnants, their presence a reminder that Rachel and I had barely managed to hold on long enough. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension bleed from my muscles as I deactivated Lucent Harmony, feeling the artificial clarity of my mana perception fade back to normal. Rachel's golden aura flickered out as well, the celestial glow of her gift dimming until she was just Rachel again. We had done it, somehow. And then I was tackled to the ground. Not by an enemy, not by an errant explosion, by Rachel. I hit the sand with a grunt, my vision briefly full of blue sky before it was eclipsed by very angry sapphire eyes. Hey, idiot! Rachel's voice was sharp, but it wavered something raw beneath the irritation. Do you have any idea how worried I was when you disappeared? Well, this is quite the scene. A distinctly amused voice purred in my thoughts. I stiffened. What? For a moment, my brain stalled, struggling to reconcile the very real threat of Rachel Creighton pinning me to the ground with the disembodied voice that just spoke directly into my mind. Relax, the voice continued, far too entertained. You already know who I am. I exhaled sharply through my nose. Luna. Obviously. You and I are bonded now, remember? Right, that. Luna's presence was warm in the back of my mind, like a constant pulse of silver light I could sense, but not fully grasp. I pushed her voice aside for now, filing away the existential crisis of sharing headspace with a celestial entity for later. I needed to deal with Rachel first. It's not like I wanted to disappear, Rach, I said, trying to sound reasonable from my very compromised position on the ground. Her glare didn't let up, and her grip on my collar remained firm, as if she was debating shaking me for good measure. I opened my mouth, about to offer some kind of reassurance, but then I realized something. The way she was straddling me was, ... could you get off? I blurted, feeling the heat creep up my neck. You're a bit. I cut myself off too late. Rachel's expression froze. Her gaze flickered down, then back up to me. Her cheeks flared red. She very deliberately pushed off me, standing in a single, fluid motion that somehow made me feel like the one being dismissed. She dusted off her uniform, slowly, before fixing me with a pointed stare. ... Were you just calling me fat? Arthur Nightingale? I paled. No, wait, I didn't mean. Her eyes narrowed further. I scrambled for a lifeline. Rachel, I just got thrown around by a 6-star serpent, and I think I might have mana poisoning from using too many elements at once, so please mercy. For a long, terrible moment, she considered it. Then she sighed, shaking her head. You're lucky you're injured, she muttered, crossing her arms. The blush was still faint on her face, but she seemed mercifully willing to move past it. She steadied me for a moment, her expression shifting from murderous to something closer to curiosity. You got stronger, she noted, way stronger. I nodded, relieved to be back in safer conversational territory. You awakened your gift, she continued, her voice quieter now. It wasn't a question. I did. I could feel Lucent Harmony thrumming at my core. The power settled, but still so unfamiliar. And I hesitated, then exhaled. I reached high silver rank. Rachel's eyes widened slightly, seriously. I nodded. She let out a low whistle, tilting her head slightly as she studied me. That explains it. Then. Explains what? The way you moved back there, her voice held something like awe, but not in the way people looked at Lucifer. It wasn't admiration from a distance, but the genuine surprise of someone who had underestimated me and realized their mistake. "You're not the same Arthur from a few days ago," she murmured. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. I wasn't the same, and I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. Rachel smiled suddenly, the tension breaking. "Well, since you can apparently cheat growth rates, you're going to have to show me exactly what you can do now." I exhaled a laugh, shaking my head. "Not right now." "I need at least," I winced as I tried to move, "a minute." She grinned, offering me a hand. "Take two." I took it, pulling myself upright. Despite the soreness, despite the exhaustion, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. Maybe it was the breakthrough. Maybe it was the bond with Luna shifting something in my core. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because, for the first time, I wasn't chasing after someone else's expectations. I was finally standing on my own path. Chapter 57, Laplace Method. "Father is sending an escort to pick us up," Rachel announced as she checked her holodevice, her tone casual, as if this was just another Tuesday. I raised an eyebrow. "Escort? Isn't that a bit much?" I rubbed my cheek absently. "We're just heading back, not storming a fortress." Rachel smirked. "It's not about safety. It's about pressure." I frowned. Pressure. "The Guildmaster of Velenar has been difficult," she admitted with a dramatic sigh. "Father wants to remind her where the real power lies." I blinked. "And you're telling me this casually?" Rachel shrugged. "It's normal stuff." Normal, right. Because casual political maneuvering between superpowers was just daily business for her. I exhaled, resisting the urge to shake my head. "Who's the escort?" I asked, mostly out of curiosity. That meant an immortal rancor at the very least. I crossed my arms. "That's a little excessive, don't you think?" "Not really," she said, scrolling through a few messages before looking up. "Guildmasters need reminders sometimes. Father believes a direct show of force will speed things along." The Creighton family had 15 immortal rank mages under their direct control. That didn't include the countless others who answered to them by proxy, bound by loyalty contracts, or sheer necessity. Sending one of them here wasn't just about protection. It was a message. Before I could think too much about what that meant for me, the air shifted. A pressure settled over the city. Not the overwhelming suffocation of a radiant rank entity, but something just a step below a weight that pressed against the bones, the kind of presence that made people look up without knowing why. The Creighton escort had arrived. "He's strong," Luna murmured in my mind, her tone mildly impressed. "High immortal rank." That put him in the top 50 in the world. My grip tightened slightly. I'd expected an immortal rank, sure, but high immortal rank. That was an entirely different level. The fact that the Creightons had multiple and could spare one for an escort mission spoke volumes about their power. The man who landed before us was tall, broad-shouldered, and wrapped in a combat uniform lined with mana-resistant alloys. His blonde hair was neatly tied back, but his eyes sharp, calculating, held a weight that reminded me of an executioner sizing up his target. He bowed slightly, but only to Rachel. "Your Highness," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "I am here to escort you and your companion, Arthur Nightingale, as per Lord Creighton's orders." Rachel grinned. "Hello, Sir Keelan." Keelan. The name sparked something in my memory, one of the oldest serving immortal rankers in the Creighton family. A battlefield specialist, known for annihilating entire squads of enemies with precision magic. He turned his gaze to me, and for a split second, I felt the full weight of high immortal rank scrutiny. It wasn't killing intent. It wasn't even hostility. It was just a cold, analytical assessment. I kept my expression neutral. Keelan gave the faintest nod, a fraction of approval, before looking back to Rachel. "Are you ready to depart?" Rachel clapped her hands together. "Let's go then, shall we?" With that, the real journey back to Luminark began. The journey back to Luminark was smooth, almost eerily so. The city, a beacon of advanced magic and technology, loomed in the distance, its skyline punctuated by towering spires adorned with shimmering runes. The moment we arrived at the teleportation hub, Keelan led us with military precision, cutting through the usual bureaucracy with the kind of effortless authority that left lesser officials scrambling out of the way. Rachel, of course, acted like this was completely normal. As we stepped onto the maglev transport heading to the Creighton estate, I couldn't help but steal a glance at her, relaxed, at ease, completely unfazed by the power plays happening around us. "You look thoughtful," she remarked, stretching slightly as we sat across from each other. I exhaled, just thinking about how different your world is from mine. Rachel tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You're part of this world now, you know." I didn't reply immediately, because that was what unsettled me. Before I could dwell on it further, the maglev came to a smooth stop. The Creighton estate was as grand as ever, a seamless blend of mana-infused structures and cutting-edge technology. The estate hummed with power, its security systems steadily woven into the very air, like an omnipresent sentinel. The sheer scale of the Creighton influence hit me again. This was one family's stronghold, yet it rivaled entire governing bodies in infrastructure and power. And at the heart of it all stood Alasta Creighton. The Archmage of the North awaited us in his observatory, a vast, circular chamber that overlooked Luminarch's glittering cityscape. The room pulsed with mana, artifacts, and data displays floating midair, each one a testament to his vast knowledge and influence. As Rachel and I entered, his gaze locked onto me immediately. "So, Alasta said, the weight of his presence filling the space, you return with more than you left with." I met his eyes evenly. "Yes, Lord Creighton." His sharp gaze flickered to Rachel for the briefest moment. Something unspoken passed between them before he stepped forward, his mana briefly flaring. "You can use 5-circle magic now," he said, not as a question, but as a fact he had already deduced. I nodded, yes. "My gift allows me to bypass the usual limitations of 4-circle mages." A flicker of interest crossed his face. "And this gift?" "You awakened it in the Cobalt Sea." I hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "Yes." Rachel shot me a glance, but she didn't contradict me. Alasta steadied me for a moment longer before his expression shifted ever so slightly, something between amusement and calculation. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he conjured a floating sphere of glowing runes between us. "The Laplace method," he stated. I immediately focused. I had heard of it before from Alasta himself, a technique used by Creighton spellcasters to optimize high-level magic, reducing casting time and improving precision. A way to bypass the usual complex calculations of 5-circle magic. I was going to grant the full Laplace method to Rachel once she reached white rank, Alasta said. "But considering your newfound capabilities, I believe you are ready for it now." The sphere of knowledge floated toward me. I extended my hand, and the moment I made contact, an influx of understanding rushed into my mind, an intricate formula, a sequence of adjustments to mana flow. A technique that felt less like a rigid structure and more like an intuitive framework to reshape my spells. I let out a slow breath. Alasta watched me, his expression unreadable. "You understand its significance?" "Yes." I nodded. "This isn't just a method. It's a complete reconfiguration of how I approach magic." His lips curved ever so slightly. "Good. Then make use of it well." Rachel, standing beside me, crossed her arms. "You're giving it to him before me. Should I be offended?" Alasta gave her an amused glance. "You will have it when you reach white rank. Unlike Arthur, you don't need shortcuts." Rachel huffed but didn't argue. Alasta turned his gaze back to me. "This is the second time you've left my estate with more than you arrived with, Arthur Nightingale. That is not a pattern I allow lightly." I didn't waver under his scrutiny. "Then I'll make sure it continues to be worth your time." A short silence. Then Alasta chuckled, the sound deep and resonant. "Interesting." Rachel clapped her hands together. "Well, since that's settled, we should get going. Mythos Academy isn't going to wait for us forever." Alasta nodded. "Keelan will escort you to the teleportation hub." No unnecessary delays. We both bowed slightly in acknowledgement before turning to leave. As we exited the observatory, Rachel nudged me slightly. You know, Father doesn't say things like that to just anyone. I exhaled. Yeah, I figured. She smiled, shaking her head. You're interesting, Arthur. That makes two of us. And with that, we departed for Mythos Academy, leaving behind one battlefield only to prepare for the next. Chapter 58, Papa's Princess. We returned to Mythos Academy with barely a day to spare before classes resumed, stepping off the warp platform just as the artificial daylight adjusted to the Academy's schedule. The moment my boots hit the ground, I could feel it, the weight of expectation. Mythos wasn't just a school. It was a proving ground, a relentless machine designed to forge the best of the best. And after fall break, the competition would only intensify. I had spent the last week growing stronger. Now, I had to prove it. Two major events loomed ahead: the next practical evaluation, another test of real-world application, and then, at the end of the semester, midterms, the first official rank adjustment. That was the goal. I clenched my fist, feeling the steady hum of mono coursing through me. Rank 2, that was the target. I had climbed to the top during island survival, then dominated the inter-year war with my strategy. But that wasn't enough. Lucifer Windward was still ahead of me, and I needed to close the gap. Rachel stretched beside me, rolling her shoulders with an easy smile. Back to reality. Didn't feel real where we just were. I shot back, raising an eyebrow. She smirked. Oh, it was real. Just a lot more fun. The Hyperloop station for first-year students was always buzzing with activity, connecting all for dorms Ophelia, Ignis, Tempest, and Aegis to the rest of the academy. Students disembarked in groups, carrying bags filled with supplies, weapons, and the occasional rare item they'd managed to obtain over break. The energy was different now. No one was a newcomer anymore. Everyone had seen what Mythos demanded. Rachel and I boarded one of the sleek, waiting Hyperloop pods that would take us straight to Ophelia dorms. The smooth hum of acceleration carried us forward, the high-speed transport system weaving through Mythos Academy's massive infrastructure with precision. Rachel leaned back in her seat. You're going to be busy catching up with everyone tomorrow. You too, I pointed out. She waved a hand lazily. People expect things from me already. You, though? You came back different. That'll make things interesting. I exhaled. She wasn't wrong. The Hyperloop chimed as it slowed, pulling into the station just outside Ophelia dorms. The towering residential structures stood tall against the artificial skyline, their windows gleaming with soft neon accents. Automated security drones hovered along the pathways, scanning students as they exited, ensuring every arrival was accounted for. Rachel and I walked together toward the entrance before naturally splitting off. She turned to me, tilting her head slightly. Get some rest. You still look half dead from the last fight. I rolled my eyes. Good night, Rachel. She grinned, swiping her ID at the entrance to her dorm wing. Night, Arthur. With that, she disappeared into the hallway, leaving me to my own devices. I stepped into my dorm wing, the familiar security skin washing over me in waves of blue light. Finally, peace. I shut my door behind me, already thinking about a shower and then maybe collapsing onto my bed. A knock. I froze. Only a handful of people would bother visiting unannounced. Rachel wouldn't. Cecilia. I sighed. Of course. Arthur Nightingale, came the voice from the other side, smooth and sweet with a barely concealed edge. You owe me an explanation. I pinched the bridge of my nose before opening the door. And there she was, Cecilia Slatemark. Golden hair perfectly styled, crimson eyes gleaming with something between amusement and mild offense, posture just relaxed enough to look effortless while still radiating control. And, of course, she stepped inside before I could even process it. Come in, Cecilia, I said dryly, watching as she gracefully made herself at home, leaning against my desk like she was about to cross-examine me. She folded her arms. You never came. I blinked. What? You never came to the Imperial Palace, she repeated, her tone light but unmistakably sharp. during fall break. Oh, that. I had, in fact, entirely ignored her invitation. I was busy, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Cecilia narrowed her eyes. Busy? Training, I replied smoothly. Expedition to the Cobalt Sea. You know, the one I told you about. Ah, yes, she nodded slowly, not buying it at all. The oh-so-dangerous expedition where you just happen to awaken your gift and also reach high silver rank. A truly unexpected series of events, wouldn't you say? Her stare bore into me, unrelenting. I refused to give her the satisfaction of looking guilty. She sighed dramatically, pushing off my desk. Arthur, Arthur, Arthur. Do you know how much effort it took for me to convince my father that you were worthy of an invitation? Do you? I crossed my arms. I don't suppose apologizing will help. She laughed. Oh, no, darling. We're far past apologies. Her gaze flickered over me, assessing, calculating. But I suppose I can forgive you. If you make it up to me. I raised an eyebrow. How exactly do you want me to do that? Her smile widened. You'll see. I exhaled, already weary of whatever game she was playing. Cecilia, I said, rubbing the bridge of my nose, are you doing this just to entertain yourself? She tilted her head, golden locks cascading over her shoulder in effortless perfection. Perhaps. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. Don't. My voice carried more weight than I expected. I'm not some toy for you to play with. Her gaze sharpened. Toy. Before I could react, she was suddenly too close, crimson eyes locked onto mine with unnerving intensity. One hand reached up, fingers grasping my jaw, tilting my face as if she were inspecting something rare, something undeniably hers. You're not a toy, Arthur, she said, voice quieter now, almost serious. The air between us crackled with something I couldn't quite name. I suppose I should tell you, she continued, her grip not loosening. I love breaking people, watching them shatter into something more ... manageable. At first, I thought I'd do the same to you. She leaned in, her breath warm against my lips. And then I realized, she whispered, her voice slipping into something lower, something dangerous. You're already broken, aren't you? I couldn't move. The words lodged themselves deep in my chest, wrapping around something I didn't want to acknowledge. A heartbeat passed, then another. And then she kissed me. Not tentative, not slow possessive. Her fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me in as if daring me to pull away. She kissed like she fought, with complete control, pressing forward until the only thing I could register was the warmth of her mouth, the taste of something sweet and intoxicating. The way she pushed until I wasn't sure if she wanted to consume me or just see how far I would let her go. Her tongue traced the edge of my lower lip before retreating, leaving a lingering heat in its wake. She pulled back, just enough to meet my gaze again, a smirk curling at the corner of her mouth. Her cheeks were flushed, the faintest hint of red dusting porcelain skin. Finally, she murmured, tilting my chin up just slightly, her fingers still resting against my jaw. I get to see you lose control. I said nothing, could say nothing. Cecilia stepped back, giving me one last lingering look before turning on her heel. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and she disappeared into the hallway, leaving nothing behind but the scent of her perfume and the phantom press of her lips against mine. I sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then, almost unconsciously, I raised my fingers to my lips. Soft. Chapter 59, Saintess and Witch. I really needed to stop underestimating Cecilia. She couldn't actually read minds, of course. That would have made dealing with her significantly easier. Instead, she did something far more dangerous. She read people too well. Even now, as I sat on the edge of my bed, I could still feel the lingering imprint of her gaze, that sharp, knowing smirk right before she walked out the door. She had read me perfectly, anticipated my every reaction, and moved exactly as she wanted. That was the terrifying thing about Cecilia Slate-Mark. She didn't manipulate people with grand schemes or long-term ploys. She saw you, decided what you were, and then acted, and it always seemed like she won. Wow, Luna's voice chimed in my mind. She's really something. How? Something terrifying. I corrected. Something crazy, Luna mused, her tone half amused, half exasperated. And you? You're a crazy guy, so it all evens out. I frowned. I am not crazy. Silence. A beat passed. Another. Luna. Oh, I just didn't expect you to lie to yourself so blatantly, she finally responded, her voice practically dripping with amusement. You're a crazy bastard, Arthur. You act like you don't have control, but in reality, you've got your hands on every single thread. You just pretend you don't. I scoffed, rubbing my temples. I don't have everything under control. Luna laughed, not out loud, obviously, but the mental equivalent of a smug, knowing chuckle that somehow irritated me more than if she had just said I was an idiot outright. Oh sure, she hummed, just keep telling yourself that. I let out a sigh, shaking my head. Getting involved with Cecilia was the worst possible decision. Not just because she was a sociopath, she was the sociopath. She had a massive sense of self-importance, a level of arrogance that could rival Lucifer's, and the complete lack of hesitation to act on whatever entertained her at the moment. It was possible for her to love normally or at least something close to it, but that was beyond difficult. Only Lucifer had ever managed it in the original story, and even then, it took a level of patience I did not possess. I sighed and rubbed my face. No more distractions. No more. A knock. I checked the door before opening it this time. My lips pressed into a thin line when I saw who was standing outside. Rachel. I exhaled, relieved. This was fine. Rachel was normal. I opened the door. Hey, Rach, what's up? She smiled, tilting her head slightly. Nothing much. I just saw Cecilia leaving your room looking. She stopped mid-sentence. Her sapphire eyes flickered, narrowing slightly. I didn't realize the problem until her gaze dropped just barely before flicking back up. Ah. I wiped my mouth. A faint smudge of deep crimson lipstick came away on my fingers. Rachel's lips pressed together. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to say anything. She turned on her heel and walked away. I sighed and rubbed my face, stupid. I decided to just rest up for the day and focus on tomorrow instead. Underscore. Rachel Creighton prided herself on being composed, logical, and checkable. She loved school, loved studying, loved the quiet satisfaction of seeing a perfect score beside her name. She had worked hard to maintain that perfection, and she looked forward to every morning with the anticipation of someone who knew she was in control of her world. At least, that was usually the case. Not today. Even after dressing in her neatly pressed uniform. Even after arriving at the Hyperloop station and greeting her classmates. Even after settling into her usual spot, textbook in hand, ready to drown out the noise with the comforting predictability of learning. None of it helped. And then, of course, Cecilia had to show up. Hey, Ray. Rachel closed her book with measured precision. It was either that or snap it shut with enough force to take off a finger. Cecilia, undeterred, flopped into the seat next to her, stretching like a particularly smug cat. Rachel inhaled deeply, exhaled. Cecilia, she acknowledged, voice cool, measured. The way one might greet an unexpected system error before rebooting everything. Are you still mad about the nickname? Cecilia pouted, tilting her head in mock innocence as the Hyperloop surged forward, sleek and silent along its magnetic tracks. Rachel didn't dignify that with a response. Cecilia's eyes glinted that particular glint that meant she was enjoying herself far too much. Or is it because of a certain boy? Rachel did not react. Cecilia, of course, took that as permission to continue. Ray has a crush on a boy, she sing-songed, stretching her legs lazily as if this were the most entertaining conversation she'd had all week. And that boy, well, he got stolen. Rachel stared at her, expressionless and blinking. Stolen, she echoed. Cecilia's smirk widened. Ma'am. His lips were so soft, too. Rachel's fingers twitched, A small, entirely accidental surge of golden light sparked at her fingertips, barely contained. Purify magic was meant for dark beasts, meant for things that lurked in the shadows, twisting and corrupting the world around them, not for irritating sociopaths. But in that moment, Rachel considered making an exception. The Hyperloop hissed to a halt, doors sliding open smoothly as students spilled out onto the Mythos Academy platform. Cecilia stood, stretching again. "Careful, Ray Ray," she purred. "Your jealousy is showing." Rachel didn't answer. She didn't have to. The moment they stepped out, their mana clashed. A faint flicker of gold and crimson, barely visible, crackled in the air between them before fading into nothing. The kind of confrontation no one else would notice, but they did. Rachel frowned. Cecilia had gotten stronger. Before, when Cecilia was still mid-silver rank, Rachel had held the upper hand. She hadn't admitted it outright, but deep down, she had known she had been superior. Now, she wasn't. Now, they were equal. Rachel took a slow breath, evened herself out, and walked forward. She had class to get to, and Cecilia Slatemark, for all her infuriating habits, was not about to ruin her perfect morning routine. At least, that was the plan. "But you shouldn't be mad if you only want to use him as a shield," Cecilia mused, her voice dripping with faux innocence. Rachel didn't miss a step. "I'm just worried about him," she said evenly, as a friend. "After all, a psycho like you has him in your sights." "A psycho," Cecilia echoed, placing a hand over her chest in mock offense. "Ray Ray, really, you need to be mindful of your words." And for the record, she leaned in slightly, eyes glinting. "He isn't prey." Rachel scoffed. "The day someone like you actually likes a boy is the day the sun rises from the west. And I don't have a crush on him," she added swiftly, voice firm. "Nor was he stolen. Nothing happened." Cecilia's smile was lazy, confident. It sent a prickle of irritation down Rachel's spine. "You know, Ray Ray," Cecilia drawled, stretching her arms behind her head. "If there's one thing I excel at aside from, well, everything, it's reading people. And I can read you very well." Rachel stopped walking. Cecilia's smirk widened. "I know something happened between you and him over the fall break," Cecilia continued, voice soft and knowing. "Something that changed how you look at him." Rachel stared. She wasn't sure why those words hit. Not because they were true, because they weren't. Obviously. And not because she had anything to hide, because she didn't. Obviously. It was the way Cecilia said it, like she had already seen the ending of a story Rachel didn't know she was in. "I don't know what he showed you," Cecilia murmured, tilting her head, examining Rachel like a puzzle she was about to solve. "But I'll find out." And in the end, her smile was razor-sharp, confident, certain, "I will win." Rachel's expression didn't falter. Her sapphire eyes met crimson without a flicker of hesitation. "You will never beat me in anything, Cecilia." Silence stretched between them, humming with an unspoken challenge. Then, without another word, they turned and walked into the Academy de Princesses to Legacies, both pretending they weren't measuring the space between them with every step. Chapter 60, Prelude to Paired Evaluation 1. "All right, for the third practical evaluation this semester, we will be conducting paired battles," Nero announced, his voice carrying easily across the classroom. "You'll be working alongside a partner to demonstrate teamwork and coordination in combat." Lucifer leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So, just another sparring match." "Not quite," Nero responded smoothly. "This isn't a test of raw strength. This evaluation is about how quickly you can build synergy with a partner you are naturally compatible with. The focus is on adaptability, communication, and combat cohesion. Consider it preparation for real-world missions where you won't always get to choose who you work with." He tapped his wristband and a holographic display flickered to life, outlining the details. "As with the previous two evaluations, this will contribute 10% to your final semester score, which determines your rank at midterms. Make sure to take it seriously." Rachel's brows furrowed slightly. Professor, could you elaborate? Of course, Nero clasped his hands behind his back. Simply put, I've deliberately paired you with someone you don't have a strong positive connection with. That's the challenge. Some of you might work well with certain people, but the real test of skill is whether you can build chemistry with someone who isn't naturally aligned with you. A low murmur spread through the classroom as realization dawned. Lucifer smirked, already seeing where this was going. And I assume you've already decided the pairs. Naturally, Nero's expression held the faintest trace of amusement. I based my selections not just on who lacks chemistry, but also on personality differences. That being said, here are the assigned pairs. Lucifer Windward and Jen Ashbluff, Ian Vazirian and Ren Kagu, Cecilia Slatemark and Rachel Creighton, Arthur Nightingale and Serafina Zenith. The moment Rachel's name was uttered alongside Cecilia's, a flicker of irritation crossed her features. A hush fell over the room as she exhaled through her nose and, for the first time in a long while, raised a hand. Professor, Rachel said evenly, though the strain in her voice was evident, do I really have to partner with someone like Cecilia? A soft chuckle rippled through the class. Even Ian looked vaguely entertained. Nero met Rachel's piercing sapphire gaze with unwavering calm. I understand the reasoning behind avoiding close partners, Rachel continued, her tone still composed but firm. But I could just as easily work with Jin or Ren, someone who, at the very least, isn't actively insufferable. You make a fair point, Nero said, nodding slightly. And that is exactly why I paired you with Cecilia. Rachel blinked. Excuse me. You are a natural leader, Rachel, Nero explained patiently. You are kind, reasonable, and easy to work with. Even if you weren't particularly close to Jin or Ren, you would be able to functionally cooperate with them. Your magic also leans toward support and auxiliary, making it easier for you to adapt to almost anyone. He gestured toward Cecilia, who smirked, enjoying every second of this. But Cecilia, Nero continued, is the opposite. She thrives on conflict, unpredictability, and individual dominance. You and she are fundamentally different, which is exactly why this test matters. In real combat, you won't always have the luxury of choosing teammates who fit your preferred dynamic. You'll have to learn how to manage people you don't like, don't trust, or outright despise. Rachel exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. She wanted to argue, badly. Cecilia stretched lazily in her chair, then shot Rachel a mockingly sweet smile. Looks like we're going to be spending quality time together, Ray. Rachel's jaw tightened. It took every ounce of restraint not to blast Cecilia across the classroom. And that, Nero said, a knowing gleam in his eyes, is precisely why you two are paired. What task will we be getting? Ian asked. It will depend on each pair, Nero replied. Due to the different strengths of each pair, the task itself will be different to make it fair. For example, I can't give the same task to you guys as the students in Class D, right? Even though they are your peers by age, the strength gap is too much. Now I want all of you to practice communication and try to get along with each other. So the third practical evaluation was exactly as I remembered, a test of teamwork, not strength. I turned my gaze to Serafina Zenith, my assigned partner for the battle assessment. As always, she had that distant, half-lidded stare, as if the entire world existed in a soft haze around her. Not bored, not dismissive, just detached. Part of it was her elven blood. Even in this modern world, elves carried an innate sense of stillness, their thoughts moving at a slower, steadier pace than humans. It gave them a certain aloofness, an air of unshaken serenity that often made them seem untouchable. Combine that with royal upbringing, and Seraphine's presence in a room felt like an unbothered goddess who had neither the time nor inclination to care about mortal concerns. She barely reacted when Nero announced the teams. She didn't even blink when I turned to her and said, "Hey Serafina, we're partners for the third evaluation. Nero's giving us time to strategize." She tilted her head slightly, her silver hair shifting with the movement, eyes a cool shade of glacial blue. It was a slow, deliberate motion, as if she were considering whether or not to acknowledge my words at all. Then she finally spoke, her voice as quiet and serene as a whispering breeze. Okay. I almost sighed. She really is the same as in the novel. Not good at socializing, not particularly interested in anyone's affairs. A walking enigma wrapped in a frosted layer of indifference. Still, I needed to get through to her. I leaned in slightly. We'll need to work together, I reminded her. We should at least talk about our strengths. Serafina blinked once, then nodded. I am Serafina Zenith, princess of the Mount Hua sect. She paused for a brief moment before adding, I specialize in wind and ice magic. That was all. No elaboration. No nice to meet you or what about you? She simply stated facts. I exhaled, resisting the urge to chuckle. This girl. Arthur Nightingale, I introduced myself in return. I use multiple elements, and I'm also a swordsman, like you. For the first time, something in her gaze sharpened. Her icy blue eyes flickered over me, measuring, weighing. You're strong, she said simply. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. I raised an eyebrow. Her senses really are different. Most people at our level wouldn't have immediately picked up on the change in my strength. I'd only recently reached high silver rank, and even though Serafina was still at mid-silver rank, she had already noticed. Then again, she was raised in a martial sect. I mused. Her entire life has been dedicated to swordsmanship and combat. Of course she'd have sharp instincts. And, of course, her grade 6 art was another factor. Even if I was technically stronger in mono rank, her martial skill bridged the gap. If this was anyone else in class, I would have had to plan around their combat style, adjust my strategies to compensate. But Serafina, she didn't need me to adjust for her. If I was a storm of unpredictable adaptability, then she was a force of pure refinement, precise, unshaken, absolute. Which made things interesting. We'll make a good team, I said, giving her a small grin. Just try not to leave me behind, princess. Serafina blinked once. Then, to my shock, the faintest hint of a smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. No words, just that brief flicker of amusement before she looked away. I couldn't tell if she was agreeing with me or challenging me. Either way, this was going to be fun.